You're about to learn how to play the CARO-KANN better than anyone else. The CARO-KANN starts with e4, c6, and usually they play d5. And this is where white has options. The first and most popular line that you need to learn how to play against is the exchange variation of the CARO-KANN. But in the exchange variation of the CARO-KANN, it's pretty simple. We're just going to be the first thing that we're always going to do is just develop the two knights. And then after we develop the two knights, we take out the bishop. The bishop goes to either g4 or f5. Personally, I like to put the bishop on g4. And then after h3, I like to pull the bishop back to f3. But if you take on f3, then that's perfectly fine. Like even the computer will tell you to take on f3. But I'm not a computer, so I keep my bishops. And then let's say the bishop move. Now we play e6, we play bishop e7 or d6. Doesn't really matter. And then you just castle your king. Now, once you get this set up, the goal is to attack on the queen side. So you're going to play a6, b5, knight a5, knight c4, or you're going to play rook c8, knight a5, knight c4, or let's just say a pawn was on c3. Let me just play some random move, something like this. If the opponent has a pawn on c3, then your plan is to play stuff like b5, b4, and this is called a minority attack. Now, in addition to the exchange variation, you also need to learn about the advanced variation of the CARO-KANN. What I like to do against the advance is just to play c5, because if they take, I play knight c6, I attack this pawn, and then once they defend the pawn, I play bishop g4, and then I target the knight that is guarding the pawn, and then I play e6, and then I try to win the pawn this way. However, a lot of times they're just going to play c3 to guard the pawn. Whenever this happens, I like to just play knight c6, and what you need to keep in mind is the main target in the advanced CARO-KANN is the d4 pawn. So after something like knight f3, feel free to play bishop g4. We're definitely going to be giving up this bishop for the knight because it's the main defender of the pawn. And the game could continue like this. Let's say h3, you take, well, that's a free pawn. They're not going to make it that easy. So let's say bishop e2, you play e6, h3, takes. Now your goal is to target the pawn on d4. So you're going to play moves like knight e7, knight f5, and then if you see bishop e3, you can think about moves like queen b6 targeting the pawn on d4. Personally, I like to just go bishop e7 here and castle, rook c8, a6, b5, knight a5, knight c4, and you should be doing fine. They don't play the exchange, they don't play the advance, they play the move knight to c3. Now, there's something that you guys need to keep in mind. After takes, you're going to be facing the alien gambit. There's bishop f5, which is the classical line. I personally like to play the Tartakoa variation. Now, before we look into knight takes f6, we're going to be looking on the alien gambit, because if you don't know how to beat the alien gambit, then you're in trouble, because we're going to play h6 and allow them to play the alien gambit. What you need to keep in mind is the winning move in the alien gambit after knight f3 is to play pawn to c5. But just be careful. There are some traps that you need to learn about. For example, if they push d5, that's not a free pawn, because bishop to c4 is actually a brilliant. And you don't want people beating you and then beating their chest, because after queen takes c4, knight e5, you lose the queen. And if pawn push, if you play bishop g4, knight e5, you also lose the bishop. So in these types of positions, like what I like to do, you could just run your king to g8, you could just develop the bishop to f5, and you're fine. Now, you're not going to see this a lot. A lot of person, they like to check. You just need to block the check, and then once they castle, you play knight c6. Just apply as much pressure on d4 as possible. Now, instead of castling, they may check the king, then castle. You're still going to play knight c6. And if they don't want to trade, they're going to play knight g8. Now, one thing I want you to keep in mind is anytime your rook on h8 is under attack, this knight is better than this rook. Plus, you're already ahead by a knight. Just play queen to e8 and chase away their knight. This is a brilliant move, by the way. And obviously, if the knight takes, you're just fine. The knight is also trapped. So you don't even have to take back the knight. You could just take on d4 and you're fine. Now, if the knight moves away, then you can continue chasing the knight around the board. The knight moves away, and then you go knight a5, and this is just completely winning for black. And finally, let's say they play the Tartakoa variation where they take on f6, you take back on f6. It's just development. The theoretical way to play for white is to play c3, bishop d3, queen c2. You're not going to see this. Most players play either bishop c4 or knight f3. If knight f3, bishop d6, let's say bishop c4, we castle. And this is now just, I just want you guys to understand the ideas and the themes and where the pieces belong. So, for example, this knight on b8 usually goes to f8. So you can play moves like rook e8, knight d7, knight f8. Another thing that I like to do is I like to play, let's say we already get our knight to f8. I like to play moves like bishop e6 or bishop f5. But If you're able to play something like b5 and then bishop e6, then bishop d5, this is going to be a very strong bishop. If this happens and then they decide to castle on the queen side, then it's just game over. Now, if you want to learn how to play the CARO-KANN better than everyone else, I want you to watch the full video, apply the stuff that I teach, and your ratings will go through the roof. Kicking things off in the 500 region. Today, I'm going to be showing you guys CARO-KANN defense. Very, very solid setup. It goes with c6, and then we play d5 after whatever they do. And my opponent here is playing the advanced version of the CARO-KANN. Now, when you see the advanced version of the CARO-KANN, just play pawn to c5, and we're basically going to be immediately targeting their pawn chain on d4. So pawn to c3 was played. Let's play knight c6, and all we're doing is we're targeting the pawn on d4. Now they play knight to f3. I'm actually going to play bishop to g4, pinning the knight to the queen. Why? Because the knight is one of the main defenders of the pawn on d4, and that's why he plays bishop to e3, because he wants to ensure that he's overprotecting the d4 pawn. Now I'm just going to play pawn to e6, and if you look at this position, it's like a French defense, but it's on steroids, because usually in the French defense, the light squared bishop is bad. But all of a sudden, I'm able to use the same bad bishop to eliminate one of the main defenders of the opponent's d4 pawn. Okay, queen takes f3 was played, and already I'm thinking about just takes, and then play queen b6, hitting both d4 and b2 at the same time. That could be winning me a pawn. So let's take on d4. Now, one thing I didn't consider is if he had taken with the bishop, but now we play queen b6 and target b2. Like whenever you're going to be playing against the advanced version of the CARO-KANN, just remember that the d4 pawn becomes the target. Always target the d4 pawn. And with the bishop being on e3 trying to protect the d4 pawn, it weakens his b2 pawn. So now I have two pieces attacking d4, and I have my queen attacking his unprotected pawn. So I think already black is just winning here because he has to guard the pawn in some way. I'm not sure. For example, pawn b3. Bishop to bishop to b4 check is just a nice inclusion. Nah, maybe. Bishop d4, there's knight d2. Bishop c3, he moves the rook. So let's just take. Now, a slight risk of taking is the fact that my knight is going to be pinned, but it's fine. Actually, is it? Takes, bishop b5 check. That's weird. If I takes, there's bishop b5 check, and I'm going to be forced to move my king. Let's say king to e7. Still attacking e5 and his rook. Knight c3 guards the rook. Queen takes e5, and that's more material. So let's go for it. Slightly risky though, I'm not gonna lie. Slightly risky. He needs to take my knight. I don't think he needs to do that though. I think it's just bad for him. It's just a bad position. Queen to d1 would be interesting because my knight is pinned, and he needs to apply pressure to the pinned knight. But luckily, I'm able to play bishop to c5, and I'm gonna just have two pieces guarding the knight, which is what he did. The knight is pinned, he's applying pressure to the knight, but I'm able to play bishop to c5 and guard the knight, which means my next move is to get out of this spin as quickly as I can, because I don't want him applying more pressure to my knight. And pawn b4 is not going to help him, because once I take with either the bishop or the queen, it comes with check. And taking on d4 was just bad, bro. And this is why to take is a mistake. You should evaluate what's happening. Because now once I take back on e4, not only is your rook hanging, your pawn on f2 is hanging, your pawn on e5 is hanging. How are you going to even guard the rook? You can't even guard the rook. You can't guard the f2 pawn. Like, what's happening here? Do I even need the rook? Should I just take on f2 and then try to checkmate his king on e3? Like, there's so much happening here. So he decides to play knight c3, which means he gave me the free knight. I'm going to be winning the rook anyways. But what if I takes king up? That's mate. Takes king here, however, that's not mate. So let's just take the free knight with check. Now he's forced to move the king, and then he's going to lose the rook. Yeah, happens. But it's a 500 rated opponent. We're going to be seeing more competitive games at the higher level. Let's just grab the rook. We're now ahead by 9 points. And then once he takes, we're ahead by 6 points. From here, it's just a matter of completing our development. King is still in the center of the board. Knight is not yet developed. Rooks needs files. Castle the king. Checkmate the opponent's king. So he moves his king out the way because he wants to develop the bishop. Rooks do need files though, especially since his queen and his king is on the same line. A lot of stuff could happen. Okay, taking on f2 was also just a free pawn, and maybe I should have taken on f2, but He allows me to take on f2 anyways. So let's just take on f2. Unless he checks, but then there's knight c6. Like this is just, yeah, this is just completely winning. 7 points. Yeah, this is GG's. Rook to e1 was played first. Let's get the king out the center of the board. So, and then he decides to play bishop back to c2. He had enough. So he's like, okay, bro, I've had enough. Let's just end the game, which is what he did because I have two pieces attacking c2. He only has his king, which means that's just a checkmate. More CARO-KANN defense against 600 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 600, and we're going to be doing some more CARO-KANN defense. After knight f3, we're still going to be playing pawn to d5, and let's see what we're going to be seeing. Usually they play the exchange version of the CARO-KANN a lot. Okay, this pawn to d3 move, I don't understand why so many people plays it though. Again, if we take on e4 and then take the queen, you lose the right to castle and black is doing fine. But I just like to play bishop g4, just to make the videos more instructive and I'll play my opponent. So a move like pawn to d3 also blocks in the light squared bishop. Let's just pull the bishop back simply because bishops are better than knights. And then from here, I'm going to play moves like e6, develop my knight. So knight to c3 was played. Now I'm going to play pawn to e6, simply trying to develop my pieces. And then he take the pawn. Now, look on what he just did. By taking the pawn, once I take back, we're actually in the exchange version of the CARO-KANN, but eventually he still has to play d4. You see what he just did? He played d3, then d4. That's wasting time, bro. But hey, let's just continue to develop normally. First thing we do when we play the exchange CARO-KANN is just get the two knights out. Pawn to a3. Maybe he thinks I want to put my knight on b4 or my bishop on b4. Nah, bro, you're making more unnecessary pawn moves. Let me just continue with my development. So far we've seen two pawn moves that shouldn't really needed to be there. But it's fine though, because he's white. Bishop e2. Let's play bishop to e7. I like to put the bishop on e7. Like bishop d6 is good, but sometimes the pin is just too annoying? And then we castle, and then we start playing on the queen side. That's basically the plan. So knight to e5 was played. Okay, it's not a bad move. My bishop is also under attack twice, so I have to react to that. So let's just take. It's usually best to like your light squared bishop is usually the worst piece. So if you can trade it off for a bishop, then that's good. I don't like to trade it off for a knight, but sometimes trading it off for a knight is fine, especially in like the advanced version of the CARO-KANN. And then my opponent just made a drawback mistake because the queen was guarding d4. Taking on e2 means the queen no longer guards d4, so he needed to take with the knight, which means now I'm just going to take on d4, hit the queen, and just like that, we're already ahead by a pawn. Okay, queen to d3 was played. My knight is under attack. Let's just pull back the knight. Let's just stay solid. I'm also attacking his knight, so I'm assuming he's going to trade, or the better thing, which is just to develop, because to take is a mistake, and we're aware of that. But look at that. Queen to b5, aggressive. He's spinning my knight. He's already applying pressure to my knight, and he's attacking b7. Okay, queen, let's just play queen to c7 here. It's fine. Guarding b7, guarding the knight. Usually, anytime you're going to play queen to c7, expect bishop to f4 to be the next move because it's logical. Like, who wouldn't put their bishop on the same line as your queen? And a good thing to do is to meet bishop f4 with bishop d6. Instead, he took. So let's just take back, attack the queen. Could have also took with the queen if we're trying to trade queens, especially since we're ahead by a pawn. And then once the queen moves, we simply get the king out the center of the board. Okay, queen to a4. Let's get the king castled. Everything is fine here. Probably should have checked his king. Definitely should have checked his king. Definitely should have checked his king. Okay, bishop f4 is a nice move because he's attacking my queen. Now, okay, I was planning on playing queen b7 to counterattack his pawn on b2, but then I noticed that I'm able to play e5. Offense is the best defense. That's still true. And I'm hitting the bishop. Bishop has to move. King is in the center of the board. I'm not able to like prevent his king from castling here, but I'm ahead by a pawn. I'm chill. Okay, so he plays bishop to g5. Not really doing much. Let's play rook to b8. Let's put our rook on the open file and attack the unprotected pawn on b2. So you could still say I'm preventing him from castling, because if he castles, he loses the pawn. Would love for him to castle on the queen side, by the way. Pawn to b4 was played. Fair. That's fair. Okay, now let's neutralize the bishop. I'm expecting him to give up his bishop for a knight. Definitely expecting that. Yeah, he did. And we're ahead by a pawn. He castles his king. I was planning on playing this move pawn to e4 because his knight is now pinned. I'm not really applying any pressure to the knight, but it's pinned, you know? And he has to find queen to b3, basically. Queen to b3 guards the knight, but it's the only move in the position, which he didn't find. And if he had played queen b3, I would have actually played queen e5, pp on the pp. So let's just take the free knight, hit the rook, and okay, this is now just completely winning for black. To b1. Now we're just trying to trade. Okay, instead of taking and allow his rook to get the file, I'm actually going to play c5. I could have taken and then trade one pair of rooks, but his rook is just not active anyways. And I'm trying to, I'm not sure, maybe even f5, f4, f3. That could attack his king. Okay, so he plays rook to d1, hitting my pawn. Let's play rook to d8 to guard the pawn first. Let's not rush. I'm not gonna lie. If I'm able to play queen f4, bishop e5, that would set up some very nasty threat. Not just to hopefully checkmate him, but just to force him to push a pawn on the side that his king is on. Okay, he attacks the bishop. Let's just pull the bishop back. That's fine. Again, my plan is to play f5, f4, f3, and that's gonna force him to push pawns on the side that his king is on. Pawn to c4 was played. And again, well, not again, I am gonna take. Usually pawn to d4 is good, but once I take, I'm immediately attacking his unprotected rook. He could be getting checkmated here. Look at this. Once he takes, his back rank is weak. My bishop covers h2. I'm attacking his rook. So if he takes on c4, I check, and that's picking up his queen, which means the rook now has to go back to b1. And he pulls the rook back to b1, which means now my pawn is actually under attack. But I'm just going to play rook to d4. Let's just play rook to d4 and guard the pawn. Now we're ahead by 5 points. And then he plays rook to d1. Okay, I was about to say, let's just trade without thinking about it. I still want to trade, but let's play c3. Let's force him to trade this way. To take is a mistake. I'm going to trade on my terms because if he takes my rook, I take with the c pawn, and now I have connected pass pawns. It's going to be very easy to roll the pawns up the board. Okay, so he decides to move the queen instead. Still gonna trade on my terms. Let's play queen d6. Now if he takes, I'm actually gonna take with the queen. So that way I'm guarding this, but I'm gonna be able to queen very easily. Hmm. God, he played pawn a4. That's a rook, bro. This is just mating two. I have two pieces attacking the rook. He only has one. So once we take the rook, he has to sack his queen. And that's just a checkmate. More CARO-KANN defense against 700 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 700. Let's play some more CARO. Knight f3, we play pawn d5. Most lower rated players are going to play the exchange version of the CARO-KANN. So, it's super important that you know what to do against this. Then, guys, if you face this and you want to prevent them from castling, then do it. I just like to play bishop g4 to make it instructive, to outmaneuver my opponent. But pawn to d3 is just bad. So bishop e2 was played. Now I'm going to play pawn to e6. Ooh, knight e5, bro. You shouldn't be moving the same pieces more than once in the opening stage of the game. I'm going to trick him. Let me show you why you don't move pieces more than once in the opening stage of the game. This may not work, by the way. Let me show you guys exactly what I want to do and then, how he could prevent it. So because the knight is unprotected, I want to play queen to a5, which checks the king and attack the unprotected knight. But because my bishop is under attack, I want to take on e2 first, and then once the queen takes, I take on e4, so that way once I check, his knight is under attack. Now, if he decides to take with the pawn, he loses the knight. But if he takes with the queen, he doesn't lose the knight. But then I'm going to be able to play knight f6, develop my knight, and gain a tempo on the queen. So let's just take on e2. I'm going to do it quickly. Let's see if he's going to fall for it. Let's quickly take. And if he takes with the pawn, there goes his knight. If he takes with the queen, we gain a tempo on the queen. He did take with the pawn, my fellow viewers. Remember, unprotected pieces, exposed king, queen to a5, check. And just like that, six moves into the CARO-KANN, and we're already winning a piece. Okay, knight c3. Let's just grab the free knight. We're already ahead by an entire piece, which means all the trades is going to be good for us. He decides to castle his king. And from here, it's just a matter of development. Let me just develop my knight, develop my bishop, castle my king. Pawn to h3. He's trying to prevent knight g4. I'm not even threatening knight g4. That's the thing. Let's just keep developing. Let's go bishop c5. And then I could either castle, then go knight d7, or go knight d7, then castle. I could also go knight d7 and then castle on the queen side. Bishop e3. Let's just take the bishop. That's a no-brainer. No need to think about that. We're ahead by an entire piece, so we're just trading. He took with the queen. Now let's play knight d7. Okay, rook to d1. Rooks needs files. Fair enough. Let's get the king out the center of the board. Okay, he plays rook to d3. He's trying to double up his rooks on the d file. I don't necessarily want to allow something like that. Another thing I notice is I'm attacking e4 twice. He's guarding it twice. So a move like knight c5 is nice. Actually, knight c5 is a blunder because the queen is the only defender of the knight. And then he plays pawn f4, chase away my queen and win my knight. Yeah, let's play queen c5. Let's just get the queens off the board. You're ahead in material, just trade. Being a CARO-KANN player, you have to understand how to convert a winning position. Like once you're winning, you have a better structure or you're ahead in material, even if it's just one pawn or so, convert the game. Trade the queens off the board. Bring them in the end game. If you watch my videos, you should know how to play the end game. Okay, he's not trading. At least he understands not to trade. Now let's play knight e5. Let's hit the rook. Now if he tries to attack my queen, I'll just take his rook and hit the queen. So I'm fine with that. And then once the queen move, I'm more than likely going to just swing one of my rooks on the d file. And then he's more than likely going to double up the rooks. But if I'm able to just trade one of them off the board, that should be good. But instead he plays rook to g3. Maybe he's trying to play queen g5 and then checkmate my king. But that's a blunder, bro, because I'm able to play knight h5 and that's a fork. Knight h5 hits the queen, forcing the queen to move, take on g3, and I'm already ahead by a piece. Now I'm about to win an exchange. Okay, guy didn't even see that I was attacking his queen. Good game, bro. This is GG's. That's crazy. And he resigns. More CARO-KANN defense against 800 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 800. Let's play some more CARO-KANN defense. And what CARO-KANN are we going to be seeing? We're already seeing an advance. Okay, knight f3. Let's play pawn d5. And if he takes, we just take back. And it's going to be the exchange version of the CARO-KANN. Which, yeah, I'm sure the exchange version of the CARO-KANN is what you guys should know mostly. Because the reason why you guys should know this is because persons are just going to take the pawn because they don't want to play anything too theoretical. Now, pawn to g3, I was not expecting. He's basically trying to fianchet to his bishop and castle. But hey, let's just develop the normal way. Let's just develop the normal way. Developing the two knights first. Then we take out the bishop to pin his knight. And if he plays h3, we play bishop h5. The plan from here is just to play e6, bishop e7, and castle. And then he plays pawn to d3. The pawn at least belongs on d4, bro, not d3. Okay, let's play e6. This is just regular development, as we said. Bishop goes to e7, king is castled, and then we play on the queen side. Just always remember. And if a bishop goes to g5, that's your cue to put the bishop on e7. Sometimes I put the bishop on e7, even without the bishop going on g5, so keep that in mind. But as I was saying, in the exchange version of the CARO-KANN, we're always going to be attacking on the queen side. Knight d2 was played. Let's get our king out the center of the board. We're going to be neutralizing this dark squared bishop. And I'm already assuming that he's going to be giving up that bishop for a knight because it's not like the bishop has anywhere else to go back. Okay, pawn c4 was played. Based on what I'm seeing, it definitely weakens his pawn on d3. I'm not really attacking it with anything as yet, but let's continue with our plan. Let's neutralize the bishop. He's more than likely going to be giving up that bishop for a knight. Like, if he tries to save the bishop could also get trapped. Okay, he decided not to give up the bishop for a knight. Yeah, he watches a bit too much of my videos because this is you prefer to lose the bishop then, bro. It was actually best to give up the bishop for the knight, which is why you have to also see what's happening in the exact position. Bishops are better than knights, yes, but not that bishop, you know? So you had to take because now if he puts the bishop on f5, pawn g5 Actually, not pawn g5, pawn e5. Because I thought I couldn't play e5 because he had two pieces on the square. But if he puts the bishop on f4 and I play pawn e5, the knight is not necessarily one of the defensive pieces because the knight is pinned to the queen. So 10 moves in the CARO-KANN defense, and we're already winning a piece. Offense is the best defense. Like these low rated players, they always do it like this. But you guys have to remember about in between moves. And so there's two ways how I'm winning here. For one, because your knight is on d2, bro, I'm able to take the bishop. And if you take my bishop, I take your knight. But I'm also able to first take your knight, and then when you take back, I take your bishop. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. But let's do it this way. Let's take the bishop. He takes my bishop, I take his knight. And I'm choosing this way because his d3 pawn and his g4 pawn is going to be hanging at the end of the variation. So it's kind of like more material for me. So okay. Oh, so he just took back with the pawn. Yeah, he sees what was happening. He just take back with the pawn, and because I'm winning, I'm well. Okay, this is tricky because okay, I'm ahead by a piece. You know, bishops are better than knights, but I'm ahead by a piece. Like I can't take on f3. I don't want to pull back to h5 and then have to pull back to g3 just to attack the pawn, and he's going to play d4. Let's just take on f3. He needs to take with the knight because his d3 pawn is hanging. But once he takes with the knight, I'm thinking queen to b6 to attack both his unprotected e3 pawn and his unprotected b2 pawn. Well, he decides to take with the bishop instead, which means pawn on d3 is now just hanging, bro. And your pawn on e3 now is also hanging. So if he doesn't protect the e3 pawn, that's going to be another pawn. We're already ahead by 3 points, by the way, which means, you know, all trades in these types of scenarios is good, like giving up the bishop for the knight, trading the queens off the board. And once you're ahead, like maybe 4 or 5 points, you could also start sacrificing pawns just to trade pieces off the board. Okay, he saw it. He saw it and he defended the pawn. But it doesn't end there though. Like, I'm attacking the pawn once, he's guarding it once. Like, what should we do? We should apply more pressure to that pawn. If you're attacking something and the opponent guards it, you're now thinking about how can I remove the defense of that pawn, or how can I add more attackers to that pawn? And then he decides to play knight back to f1. Okay, do we trade the queen or do we take a free pawn? Let's just trade the queens. I mean, being ahead by 3 points, it makes trading easier. So now I'm going to play rook to d8, and then I'm just going to trade. The more I trade, the closer I'm bringing the game to me winning. And the more he trades, the closer he's bringing the game to himself losing. Okay, so he plays knight d2. He doesn't want to trade. But what he didn't see is the knight and the bishop is on the same diagonal here. So what's wrong with a move like bishop to b2? His knight is now pinned, by the way. He can't move that knight. So I'm threatening to win the knight. And the only way for him to guard the knight is to play rook to e2, but then his rook on d8 becomes an unprotected piece. So he could find himself into a lot of trouble here. And if I wanted to like trade two pieces quickly, I just take the knight, take the rook, swing over the other rook, and then everything is going to be traded. But because this rook is unprotected and this knight is pinned, the plan is to PP on the PP. So let's start with knight to e5, hitting the bishop. I'm threatening to take, and if his knight takes, he loses the rook. And if he takes on b7, I just hit the bishop. All my pieces are going to be active. And then the plan is knight takes c5, because if he takes my knight on c4, he loses his rook on d1. Okay, he took the pawn. Let's play rook to b8. Let's hit the bishop. Maybe he could try bishop a6, but he pulls the bishop back to e3, which is the worst square for the bishop. Because now once I take the bishop with check, if he takes with the knight, he loses the rook. But if he moves the king, he also loses the knight. So he just lost like 6 to 8 points out of material just by pulling the bishop back to f3. He moves the king, but now it's time to start trading. So let's take with the rook. And any rook that he decides to take with, I'm just going to take back. And okay, the advantage is just too big here. So he took with his rook. Let's take with the knight. And the opponent resigns. But more CARO-KANN defense against 900 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 900. Let's play some more CARO-KANN defense. Knight of 3, pawn d5. Exchange CARO-KANN. Are we going to be seeing exchange CARO-KANN? Okay, exchange CARO-KANN it is. Why is everybody playing pawn to d3? That blocks out the bishop. You need to play pawn to d4. That's weird. Let's just develop normally though. Like first, let's just get the two knights up. Pawn g3. I think he's trying to play the King's Indian. I think he's trying to play some King's Indian attack type of thing. But it's weird. Like, this is how we're always going to be developing against the CARO-KANN. Once the king castle, I'll play e6, bishop e7, and castle. And all the pieces joins the game very, very easily. He says, nice to play with you, sir. Nice to play with you as well, bro. And if you want to play against me, leave your comment. You leave the ELA as well. So that way it's easy for me. So, for example, if I'm not able to find someone in the 1100 region, then I send you a message, you know? Okay, knight d2, let's castle the king. King is castled, all the minor pieces are developed. He played c3, which means he wants to play d4. But why wouldn't you just play d4 in one move from the get go? Like, why do you have to waste time in order to do all of this? Let's just neutralize that bishop. Let's just chase that bishop out of our half of the board. I was expecting him to give up the bishop for the knight. Let's just take. He still didn't play d4. He played rook to e1. Okay, I mean, it's a very solid position for white. Like, I still have to put out a lot of effort to win. Like, there's no major weaknesses in his position because he's gonna play d4 soon, unless I play d4 now. But yeah, that's interesting. I mean, if I play d4, he plays c4. Let's just play rook to c8. Let's just get my rook on the file and then connect my rooks and get the other rook in the game. Queen to b3 was played. He's attacking my pawn on b7. Let's play queen to d7, guard the pawn, connect the rooks. Guy's playing some chess. It's an easy position for him to play. Like, notice how he's getting all his pieces in the game. I mean, guy watches my videos. You know, what can I say? All right, let's play rook to d8. Let's get all our pieces in the game. And it's usually here where people blunder. You know, like, you're out of the opening stage of the game, you develop your pieces, but then you don't know what the plan is. And because you don't know what the plan is, you start blundering. But anyways, pawn h3, let's pull the bishop back to h5. Let's maintain the pin on his knight. I'm expecting pawn d4. And as we said a lot in the exchange variation of the French, not the French, the CARO-KANN, we're going to be attacking on the queen side. So, I mean, personally, not sure what this guy's doing, but hey, let's play a6. I'm going to play a6, b5, just being patient. Again, there's no real weaknesses in the opponent's position. So we have to be patient. We have to continue to improve our position, improve the activity of all our pieces. And he's also playing some good prophylactic moves. Pawn to a4 prevents me from playing pawn to b5. But then the a pawn, it's the only pawn that is on the fourth rank. It becomes a little weak because now I'm going to play knight a5 and attack the queen, and he has to keep the queen guarding the pawn, which is not hard. Like, once he moves the queen will be guarding the pawn. Okay, queen to a2, he keeps the pawn guarded. All right, so d3 is unprotected, but if I attack it, he's just gonna push it. I kind of don't want him to push d3 anyways. So I'm gonna play b5 no. Slightly risky move, but this is me putting pressure on the opponent. Now, something I like to say a lot is at the lower level, like anything below 1200, you can win games without putting pressure on the opponent. Like, you could, like, if you guys watch these games, even against higher rated players than 1200, I do it to where I just keep constantly developing my pieces, constantly putting my pieces on good scores until they blunder. This guy's not doing that. Rook to a1 is also a nice move because now he's threatening to take, and then once I take, he's going to win my knight. Whoa. With this being said, let's just pull the knight back. Let's just pull the knight back. If he takes, I take, and then I'm going to try to play b4. This is just me trying to attack on the queen side, by the way. Now, usually these players, below 1,000, maybe the reason why he's not maybe 11, 1200 is due to some blunders that he makes. Let's see. A5 wasn't really the best decision to make, though. Now, to continue my attack, I'm going to play b4. I'm threatening his pawn on c3 twice. If he takes, I take, hit the queen, and then I'm targeting his weak d3 pawn, which is why I didn't want to attack the pawn, because attacking the pawn would have actually forced him to unweaken the pawn, if that makes sense. You see, he plays it now, but now once I take on c3, his pawn on c3 becomes a backward pawn, and the goal from here is to target that backward pawn. So okay, let me. Now I'm gonna play. Now I'm gonna play bishop back to g6. I may want to play bishop d3 to prevent him from pushing the pawn, and I also want to play knight a2 to b5 to just apply more pressure to the pawn. If I play knight a2 in some lines, he could play c4 in some lines. I mean, he could also be hanging his pawn on d4. From a structural perspective, I think black is doing fine here, but I mean, white's not losing, but I think black is slightly better because his pawn structure is just bad. But I want you guys to notice how I have to use more than just trying to outplay him to win. I have to put pressure on him in order to win, and that's a good sign. Being such a low rated player, and he's forcing me. Okay, now He's trying to put his knight here. I need to prevent that. I was thinking about playing this and then this, but then I saw this. So if the knight goes here, I take. So if in order for me to win, I have to put pressure on you or risk myself losing, then that's a good sign. Other persons I beat, I literally don't do anything. I just improve my pieces and they blunder. Okay, rook b2 was played. Now I'm gonna play knight to a2, attacking the backward pawn. Another thing is I also have to use advanced strategic measures to beat this guy. I have to target his pawns. I have to target his weaknesses. Below 1,000, the guy should have blundered a pawn. Give it up for the 900 guy. He's playing some chess. Okay, he already blundered the pawn. But he played some chess. I mean, the guy played some chess. Okay, rook takes e3. I'm just ahead by a pawn. No, it's just a matter of trading. Knight b5 also, blocks out his rook from doing any good attacking role. Target his isolated pawn on d4. Knight to e5 attacks my queen, forking my queen and my bishop. And then once my queen move and he takes the bishop, I already have a bad pawn structure. Wait, could he have done that from before though? Yeah, the moment I play knight a2, he should have done that. Yeah, which means me pulling my knight back to a7 was a drawback mistake. But let's just play queen c7 here. If he takes, I take. Maybe he's gonna say I don't want to trade. Okay, he did it, because he's also like bishops are better than knights. So let's reevaluate the position from a structural standpoint. It's so because my structure is not the best, and rook to e1 is just such a good move, such a good move. Because even if I try to defend the pawn, he's just gonna sack the rook. Look at this. If I play rook d6, he sack the rook, and then plays bishop takes d5. Whoa. Okay, let's play rook to c1. Let's get the rooks off the board. Like this is me still using advanced measures to beat this guy. You're ahead by a pawn, trade the pieces off the board. Someone is attacking you, trade off the attackers. This is advanced stuff. Like this is the 900 rated guy. I'm sure if you check something higher, I'm not sure, but you're gonna see. Come on, bro. You blundered the rook, bro. I'm giving you compliments. Come on, bro. You see, that's why he's 900. Because he plays like Magnus the entire game and then blundered his rook. Come on, bro. Whoa. Okay, all right. Now this is just winning. Let's play rook to f8. Nah, let's play queen c4. Queen c4 is very strong because it pins the knight to the queen. And if he moves the knight, I trade the queen. I'm ahead by an entire rook as well. That's crazy, by the way. It's funny because I also was using more time than him. And now the 900 in him starts to shine. Because I mean, you shouldn't make the trade that easy for me, at least. Now I'm gonna play rook to e2. Now I'm pinning the knight to the rook. The plan is to PP on the PP. But it's also attacking this pawn on f2. So if he tries to guard the pawn on f2, that's when I hit him with bishop b4. So he needs to be aware that I'm threatening all of these things and maybe play bishop f1. I'm gonna take with check though, and this is just winning. So rook c2, if I apply pressure to the knight, he's going to play rook c7 and attack back my knight. So let's just take the free pawn on f7. It just doesn't work, so let's just take the pawn. At least his bishop is pinned. If he attacks my rook, I should be able to guard it. Okay, rook to c7 is still a good move. He attacks the rook, let's guard it. And if he plays rook c7, that's a fork. But I'm just going to take his knight. And then once he takes my bishop or my knight, then I just move the other piece. I'm ahead by 7 points. I'd love to trade with you, sir. So let's just take. Now, which piece is he going to take? He took the bishop. Now let's play knight b5. Okay, yeah, let's play knight b5. This is hanging. And this is also hanging, but let's hit the rook. I'm also trying to checkmate him here. I'm ahead by an entire rook, so I can get away with taking some risk. Let's play knight to f3 check. And I think he has to trade the bishops. If he has to trade the bishops, I'm just winning. If he plays king here, then I check and I win his bishop. Okay, he's able to play king to f1 though. Okay, he traded. Let's just take. And this should lead to checkmate. But you played very well, bro. I'm not gonna lie. And the opponent resigns. More CARO-KANN defense against 1,000 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,000, and we're going to be playing some more CARO-KANN defense, keeping things very solid. Pawn to d5 here. And what will we see? The exchange CARO-KANN. We're seeing knight to c3. Now, whenever they play knight c3, we're just going to be taking on c3 here. And I like to play the move knight to f6. Now, bishop to f5 is also a move, but knight f6 is the easiest one to play because it also welcomes the alien gambit. And, the alien gambit is a free piece. So we're definitely going to be taking the free piece. Now, whenever they take on f6, though, it's crucial that we take with the e pawn, not the g pawn, because when we take with the e pawn, it's easy development for our dark squared bishop. So knight to f3, we play bishop to d6, we get the king out the center of the board. Very, very solid stuff. Bishop to d3, he's also developing. Let's get the king castle. He got his king castle. And from here, there's a lot of different ways in which we could develop. Like, for example, there's bishop to g4. Usually, when they allow us to play bishop g4, we're always going to be taking it. So let's just start by playing the move bishop g4. One thing we need to be aware of is any sacrificial ideas on h7, which is not. Because if he sacked the bishop, we takes, and then if the knight goes here, we takes. And yes, he's going to take on g4, but he gave us two pieces just to win our bishop. So that wouldn't be a good deal for him. H3 is what I'm expecting here. And whenever they play H3, knowing that bishops are better than knights, we're just going to be pulling back the bishop, maintaining the pin on the knight. And then from here, it's just development. Now, pawn to c4 was played. Good move from the opponent. Let's just continue following the principles here. This knight on b8 has not yet been developed, so let's develop that knight. Now, all our minor pieces are developed, which means from here it's time to start thinking about our major pieces. Now, pawn to c5 is a very interesting move. Very, very interesting move because usually pulling the bishop all the way back to b8 so that way we're able to play queen to c7 and just try to apply some pressure to his h2 square. To threaten some checkmate is usually good, but I don't like the bishop on b8 if my rook is not on c8 because that's just killing my rook. So with that being said, let's put the bishop on c7 here. Let's put the bishop on c7 because it's very important that the rook stay connected. I'm trying to play moves like rook to e8, knight to f8. Rook e8, knight f8 is also crucial for you guys to know because this, if you notice, the knight doesn't really have any forward moves. So if you keep the knight on d7, it's not really doing anything. And it's also important that we develop our pieces. Now he plays pawn b4, which is good. Like he's trying to attack on the queen side. Let's play the move rook to e8 here, just controlling the open file. And then I'm going to be playing the move knight to f8. Now, knight to f8 also guards the h7 pawn, by the way. So, for example, we don't have to worry about any battery on h7. We don't have to worry about any little pulling back the bishop and getting mated. And usually the knight enters the game via g6. So it's like knight f8, knight g6, knight f4, and those ideas. Plus, the pawn on d4 is actually a weakness, so just keep that in mind. So let's continue with the plan. Bishop to e3 was played. Good development move. Let's play knight back to f8. The good thing is we know the plan and we know what we're going to be doing with all our pieces, so we shouldn't have any problems doing anything here. You just commented, thanks for accepting my request. I always wanted to play with you. But, all you need to do is just comment your username with the ratings. I send you guys the message, and, that's the easiest way for me to reach out to you guys to play. Now, Rook to E1 was played. He's getting his Rook on the file, which makes a lot of sense. I'm trying to play Queen to D5, centralizing my queen, applying pressure to his knight on d4. Eventually, I could eliminate that knight on d4 and target this pawn. Well, eliminate the knight on f3 and target the pawn on d4. The thing is, okay, I'm gonna do it. I was about to say I don't want to do it because I don't want to have to worry about bishop c4. For example, queen d5, rook c1, but I'm just gonna take a pawn. Bishop c4 could still be annoying though. I just don't want to waste any time. That's the issue. So because I don't want to waste any time, let's actually just put the queen on d7. It's literally the same thing. Queen d7, queen d5. I'm still targeting d4. I just don't want bishop to c4 in the future to be annoying. And I'm also trying to play rook to d8 because you guys know after the development of all your minor pieces, it's time to get your major pieces in the game. So my a rook is the only piece that is not doing anything. So the goal is to put the rook on d8, apply pressure on d4, maybe even play knight e6, more pressure on d4, get rid of the knight on f3, which is one of the main defenders of d4 and then win the d4 pawn. That's one plan. Another plan is to play rook d8, bishop b8, queen c7, eliminate the knight on f3, and try to get the queen to the h2 square. There's also other plans here where if the bishop was already on g4 and they play h3, we're able to sack the bishop on g4. But the opponent decided to play the move rook to e2, which is a mistake. It's kind of like a drawback mistake, but it has nothing to do with the actual. Well, it has a lot to do with the rook, but it's not necessarily what was the rook doing that it's no longer doing. It's the fact that the rook moves to e2. So it's a case where what was the queen doing that it's no longer doing. So that's also something where you put a piece in front of a piece that was doing something. That's also a drawback mistake, because all of a sudden now I'm able to take the knight, because usually you don't give up bishops for knights, but look at this, I'm already winning a pawn, because the pawn on g2 is now the only defender of both the pawn on h3 and the knight on f3, which means the pawn on g2 is overworked. So let's just take the knight on f3. And, I'm assuming he's going to take back. Otherwise, he's going to be losing a lot of material. But once I take on h3, he has to start defending like some GM here. But black is winning. Just that one move that white just played, it moved from, okay, I like my position, to black is just winning. So it also goes to show you guys that once you know the plans, notice I really didn't do a lot in this game. I just knew the plans. I didn't really set up the tactic or anything. I just knew the plans. And then the guy decided to play this. My next move was literally rook to d8, getting all my pieces in the game. And then once all my pieces were in the game, that's when I was planning on starting the attack. But a lot of times, if you know the plans, and the plans involve, let's say, 12, 13, 14 moves, before you even try to finish said plan, the opponent is, you see what he just did? He's so scared of exposing his king. He prefers to blunder his rook. So now I'm gonna take the rook, and I'm just ahead by an entire rook now. An entire rook. Another thing I'm seeing is queen is on the same line as my rook, but let's finish our development first before we start getting fancy, because that was the plan. Pawn to a4 was played. Now we're already attacking d4 twice. He's guarding d4 once, but we're not going to play queen takes d4 here. So let's play the move knight to e6. Guys, I just want you to be able to know where to put the pieces. That's one. But not only know where to put the pieces, know the plans with the pieces from where they are. So, for example, we kind of knew where to put the knight and how to get the knight on f8, rook e8, knight d7, knight f8. But you still have to know the plans with the knight. The knight usually goes to e6. The knight usually goes to g6. Bishop f5 is an interesting move, but luckily, I don't think it works though. That's the thing. I'm ahead by 5 points. I want to be trading pieces off the board. Yes, he's pinning my knight, but offense is the best defense. And I am able to take on d4 and hit the queen. And if I take on d4, that is a fork. Now, here's what I'm seeing. If I take a pawn, he takes my queen, I take his queen with check, force his king to move, maybe even check him here again, but eventually I'm going to be grabbing back the bishop and I'm trading. Or I grab the pawn, he takes back, and then if he takes back, then I take the bishop, or even the queen. So knight takes d4 here is just more material for us. So he took the queen. Let's take his queen with check. He attacks my knight. And okay, if here's what I'm going to do. Let's just take the bishop. So that way, when he takes my knight, his king is now pinned to his bishop. And I'm able to play bishop to f4 and pp on the pp. Now, I'm not going to be winning the bishop. It's two attackers versus two defenders. But rook to e7 is also coming. So that's going to be three attackers versus two defenders. Rook to a3 makes some sense. He's adding more defense to the bishop. So let's just take the bishop, because I'm not going to be winning any material here. He took with the pawn, and now that we're in the end game, the whole idea is to be attacking pawn. So let's start by playing the move rook to d4, targeting his pawn on b4, knowing that pin pieces doesn't protect, and then he moves the pawn to b5, and now we play rook to c4, continuing to attack the pawns, because that's what we do in the end game. Like, the best thing would be for black here is just to trade the last pair of rooks off the board. If I'm able to trade the rooks, then I'm just winning here. Well, I'm still winning. But let's just take this pawn. And then if he takes this pawn, I play rook to a8 and then attack this pawn. And it's basically a pawn that he's not able to protect. Like he could try rook to d3. So that way, if I take his pawn, then I'm mated. But okay, we're not going to be getting checkmated like that. Let's just play pawn g6, creating loft around our king. So that way, once he checks, the king is able to move. And this is now GG's. Let's take the free pawn. We're already attacking the pawn on a4. He checks, but it's just a check, nothing else. Moves the king. Now we grab the pawn. And from here, it's just a matter of taking all his pawns. Rook to e5 here. That's two attackers on the pawn versus one defense, which means we're also going to be taking on e4. Rook to d7. What do we know about the endgame? We don't trade pawns in the endgame. We win them instead. So let's play pawn to b5, just continuing to roll the passed pawn up the board. Rook to c7. We do not trade pawns in the endgame. We win them. So let's play rook to c4 first. Patience is crucial in the endgame. And then we're going to play rook takes e5 like this. And then we're going to be rolling the pawn up the board. So he moves the king. And from here, okay, passed pawns must be pushed. But let's go rook to c2, because if I could get both of my rooks on his second rank, then that could also just lead to a checkmate here. And he has literally no ways in which he could even check my king. And the opponent resigns. More CARO-KANN against 1100 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1100. Let's play some more CARO-KANN defense. Knight f3, we play pawn to d5, and we're seeing more exchange version of the CARO-KANN, which is kind of the ones that you guys are going to be seeing mostly. So please pay attention on how to do this. It's very simple. First thing we do is we take out both of the knights because development is important. So it's not a case where I'm like, remember to take out the knights. Nah, it's just you need to develop. So just develop the knights. And then after you develop the knights, I like to develop the light squared bishop before thinking about the dark squared bishop, so that way we don't play e6 too early and block out the light squared bishop. Now pawn h3, let's just pull back to h5, maintaining the pin. Pawn g4, we pull back to h3. Now this is actually very aggressive how my opponent is playing, because it looks like he's about to win the bishop here and he's applying pressure to my pin knight. So that's not bad at all, to be honest. And if I play queen c7, there's bishop f4. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put the queen on. Wait, let's think. If queen b6, there's pawn g5. And if I move the knight, there's actually knight d5. So let's play rook to c8 here and apply some defense to the pawn, well, to the knight on c6. And then I'm going to play pawn e6 and finish my development. The good thing is we're playing the CARO-KANN defense, which means our position is very solid. It's never going to be a case where we're losing coming out of the opening. No, he took on g6 and, slightly uncomfortable that we don't have the bishop here. But let's look on the upside of things. We take towards the center of the board. The rook now has the open file. He moves his knight 3 times. We also move our bishop a few times as well. So in terms of development, we're not behind in development. Queen to f3 was played. He's applying pressure to my pawn on d5 twice. I'm guarding it twice, but a move like pawn to g5 could still come and apply even more pressure to my pawn. So here, let's just play the move pawn to e6. Let's just develop here, staying solid. Bishop to g5 was played, and a lot of times when the bishop is on g5, it's just, we just play bishop e7. Now once we play bishop e7, we don't have to worry about any pin. Our position is just so solid here. Just have a look on our pawn chain, and then the opponent decides to castle on the queen side, which is very aggressive. But the good thing is, at least we're going to be able to have opposite side castles. Now what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to rush to castle my king, and it's important that I try to explain to you guys why. So first of all, if I castle my king, it's actually easy for him to play h4, h5. So I think my king is actually safer in the center, because there's actually no ways for him to open the center. There's no pawn breaks. If he wants to break up this chain, he has to put a pawn on either f5 or c4 or sacrifice some pieces, and that's not yet possible. So I'm going to use this time to try to start my own attack on his king. And it's not like my rooks are not doing anything. All my pieces are doing something here. It's just that my king is in the center of the board. So currently we have 2 pieces on our half of the board. Let's just start our neutralization process. Hit the bishop, forcing the bishop to move or give up himself for a knight. Let's see which one he's going to choose. Okay, giving up a bishop for a knight. Just like that, easy like that. It's never really the answer. Pawn takes followed by pawn c5 is fine, by the way. But let's just play Let's just play rook takes here and then try to apply some pressure along the c file. So pawn b5 followed by pawn b4 just to start our attack. There's also queen a5, pawn b5, pawn b4. And once you play the exchange version of the CARO-KANN, you're always going to be attacking the opponent on the queen side because sometimes they're going to have a pawn on c3 and you're still going to be going for the minority attack. But since the rook is on the same line as my king, we need to be careful about any bishop takes, knight takes ideas here, because guy's not playing too bad. Let's play pawn to b5. Let's play pawn to b5 here, to continue with our attack on the queen side while he's trying to open the center of the board and attack our king side. So one rule for you guys to keep in mind, and if you want to memorize stuff, these are the stuff to memorize. If the opponent is attacking you on the flank, you need to counter in the center or on the other flank. I'm not able to counter in the center because my king is in the center. So I'm basically trying to counter on the other flank here. White needs to find some ways to open the center. I just think my king is just so safe and my position is just so solid. There's nothing that he could do. Bishop takes knight, knight takes. Okay, he could try that. Look at this. If he plays bishop takes knight and I play bishop takes knight, there's actually knight takes pawn because the rook is on the same line as my queen. You see why you don't want to have the rooks on the same line as your king? Because that's just me losing a pawn. The good thing is, if he plays bishop takes knight, I'm able to play pawn takes knight and I'm fine. But that was close. So he found it. He did play bishop takes knight. Now let me check it again. If I take with the bishop, he takes. So we have to take with the pawn, which means now if he takes with the knight, I'm just chilling because my bishop is fine. Still a very solid position. Eventually, I'm going to castle if I'm able to like trade the queens off the board, or I notice that my attack is faster than his. But if I castle my king now, h4, h5 is just going to come too fast, too risky. And then he played queen g2 because he wants to play f4 followed by f5 and open the center. He knows some stuff, so that's something. Now here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna play the move queen to c7. Not only am I preventing f4, I'm also applying more pressure along the c file, which means for one, he's not able to move the knight because he loses the pawn on c2. But I was also threatening to play pawn to b4, and then when he moves the knight, he loses the pawn on c2. But now he decides to play the move queen to f3, and I'm getting a lot of ideas now. Now I'm getting a lot of ideas. I mean, I could take stakes, but that gives me nothing. I think that gives me a slightly better endgame. But let's play the move bishop to d6, just because it gains a tempo on his queen. Now, what I need to notice is my pawn on e6 is now pinned, which means my pawn on d5 is now unprotected, but his queen is under attack. So if he takes the pawn, I just take his queen. He takes my queen, I take his pawn. Oh, okay, but then he has queen to f3, which is a good move. Queen to f3 is such a good move because not only is he threatening knight takes d5, he's also threatening queen takes f6. So to defend against both of these, luckily I have something. I have bishop to f5 check, which means it currently guards my f pawn because the king has to react to this. And then I'm just going to get my king off the same line as his rook. It's funny. I'm not going to castle because I still think h4, h5 is just too risky. But I'm going to play king to f8 to get my king off the same line as his rook. I think my king is safer on g7 with my rook on h8 than my king being on g8 with my rook on f8 because my rook on f8 doesn't really do much. Queen to d3. Okay, I think he plays queen to d3 to just ensure that his c pawn here is guarded. I still need to be careful. I still need to ensure that my king is safe. I need to look on the possible ways in which he could move his pieces forward. And I'm definitely going to play the move king to g7. Now, I definitely have some ideas of tripling up on the c file and then playing b5, winning the pawn on c2. But I have to time it perfectly. And I'm also expecting him to play knight to e2. He didn't play it right now, but I'm expecting it. And h4, I'm also expecting. So let's say we play rook to c8 and then triple up on the file, and then he plays pawn to h5. Should be able to play g5, and I should be able to play b4. So let's go with this idea. It's the timing is everything, because you could say my king is like by himself over there, but he needs to now ensure that he's not losing anything on the queen side. So I'm expecting him to play a move like pawn a3. It's a good prophylactic move, being aware that I'm threatening to play pawn to b4 and preventing it. Okay, he plays rook to a3, which means he missed the idea. And he needs to be very careful now. He could even be getting checkmated if he's not careful. Like, first of all, we have an Alikind's gun pointing towards the c file, which means once I'm able to play pawn to b4 and chase away his knight, I'm going to have three pieces targeting c2. He's only going to have two pieces guarding c2. Now, knight to e2 attacks my bishop, but it's being guarded by the queen, so I'm still going to be taking on c2. And the good thing is, taking my knight isn't even good because rook to c1 is going to be leading to a checkmate. So definitely like my position here, and I'm sure black is better. Okay, he played knight takes d5, which is, I don't know, maybe it wasn't necessary. Like, or maybe he sees how dangerous this was, but I mean, I'm definitely going to be taking that knight. And maybe he's going to use the time to guard his pawn. You don't really want to sacrifice a piece and then your next move is a defensive move. Like, that basically means something went wrong. Now, okay, rook c2 was played. We're ahead by a piece, which means from here the goal is to just start trading. So the first move that comes to mind is rook e6 to start trading. But rook e6 takes, and then h5. My king feels a bit exposed. I'm not gonna lie. But the goal is in fact to trade. So let's go for it. Let's play rook e6. Takes h5. Oh no. I was thinking about takes h5 and then I play g5, but then there's queen g6. There's actually queen g6. And then if he plays h5 now, he is actively threatening queen g6. Luckily, I have defense for it. You know, I could play pawn to f5, I could play queen to f7. But pawn to h5 here is very strong. I could also take, nah, not even considering taking that pawn. Like, we don't want to open any lines pointing towards our king. He plays rook to f3 instead. Some pressure on my bishop. Now I'm going to play pawn to e5, just guarding the bishop, and I'm fine. And then if he takes, I takes, and my d pawn is going to be hanging. But he's not going to be able to touch the d pawn because his c pawn is going to be hanging. So he takes, I take back. I'm also threatening pawn to d5, which is a fork, so he has to be careful. And he saw that, so he decides to move his queen away. And he also ensured that he kept the defense of his c2 pawn. Now, my king is safe, so I have nothing to worry about when it comes to my king. I mean, this pawn is also untouchable, so no need to guard it now, but I'm not seeing what else is there to do. So let's just play queen to c4. It's guarding my pawn. It's also improving my position. I'm trying to play moves like maybe queen to e4, or just push my a pawn all the way up the board to create some weaknesses around his king. Rook to d3, okay. Now there's two pieces attacking my pawn on d5. But I'm just going to move it forward. Like, once I move it forward, I'm safe. It's not like he's going to play c3. It's not like he's able to ever play c3. And I need to be patient here. He wants to play a5. Yeah, he definitely wants to play h5. How do we do this? Okay, let's just play a5. Like, he's playing h5, I'm playing a5. We're both going to be attacking each other's king. But I'm the one who's ahead by a piece. And queen to d3 is just bad. Like, you don't be down in material and then just trading pieces off the board. Now, in his defense, he has like a minute 10 on the clock. But now it's just going to be a easier game for me to play. Because now I can also activate my king in the end game. Before, I couldn't activate my king. And then checking someone's king in the end game like this, it doesn't help. Like, if you look on the position before, his pawn was actually covering the f5 square. Now I'm able to play king to f5 and I'm continuing to improve my king. Pawn to b3 weakens the c3 square. What do we do? Rook to c3. Trade even more pieces off the board. And then if everything is being traded off the board, then it's just the easiest win first. He didn't trade, so let's play rook to h3, attacking the opponent's weak pawns because that's what we do in the endgame. We attack pawns. He moves the king. Let's grab the pawn. We're also going to be taking this pawn. Yeah, we're just going to be taking all his pawns here. Now, rook to d3. I'm actually going to play rook to h1. And this is me setting up some checkmating ideas. Pawn to a3 allows me to play bishop to c1 check. And then he has to move the queen. And because I want to checkmate him, I'm going to choose to take with the pawn. Because if I'm able to get my bishop to b2 and my rook to a1, that's actually going to be a checkmate. So his king is in a mating net. Pawn c4 doesn't help. Bishop to b2. How is he going to prevent this? He didn't prevent it, which means that's just a checkmate. More CARO-KANN against 1200 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1200. Let's play some more CARO-KANN defense. Now, d4, I'm going to play d5, just the regular stuff. This is what we're always going to play. Knight d2. Now, knight d2 is no difference from knight c3. Like, with alien plays a lot of knight d2, so I'm not gonna be surprised if this is gonna be an alien gambit. Knight takes c4. We play knight to f6, hit the knight, and okay, if we see knight g5, then the guy watches with the alien videos. Otherwise, if he takes on f6, we take with the e pawn, and we're just playing some Tartakower stuff. Okay, he took on e6. Let's take with the e pawn. Let's just take with the e pawn. And we know the procedure here. Bishop d6, castle on the king side. Very simple stuff. Ooh, immediate bishop to c4. Haven't really seen bishop c4 a lot, but let's continue with the plan. Bishop goes to d6. King is gonna get castled. Very simple stuff. And then I'm assuming he's gonna castle his king. So he castled his king, and now it's time for me to finish my development. So let's just play the move bishop to g4 here, pinning the knight to the queen. Usually they're gonna play pawn to h3, and I'm just gonna pull the bishop back, maintaining the pin. And knight d7 to f8 is usually an idea. Knight d7 to b6 can be an idea now, seeing that his bishop is there, but usually it's not an idea. Okay, bishop to e3 was played. Let's just continue with our development. Knight to d7. And now I have all my minor pieces are now developed. And what you guys should hear me say a lot is after the development of all the minor pieces, we start thinking about the major pieces. So we're now thinking of moves like queen to c7 to connect the rooks. But I may actually play rook c8 followed by bishop b8. This is a more aggressive way to do it because it comes with immediate checkmating threats on h2. So rook e1, yep, let's go rook c8. And I'm just playing rook c8 because I don't want to pull my bishop back to b8 and then blocking in my rook. And usually a rook on d8 and a rook on e8 is fine, but nothing is wrong with a rook on c8 because eventually you should be able to play pawn c5. So pawn c3, let's pull the bishop back to b8 and then try to play queen c7. And what I'm basically trying to do is I'm trying to force him to push pawns on the side that his king is on. So watch this. Now that I'm threatening or removing the guard tactic, by the way. I'm threatening to take his knight and then take his pawn in h2. I know that he's not going to fall for this, but what I want to do is I want him to weaken his king side. I want him to play something like pawn to g3, which he did. And now that he's doing this, he's pushing pawns on the side that his king is on, which means the light squares around his king is now weak. Now let's just continue with our development though. Let's go rook to e8, just getting my rook on the open file, simple stuff. And you could say my queen and my bishop, they has done their job. And then he played bishop to f4 as well. So he's also trying to trade. Um, so let's just pull the queen back. And then once he takes, we're just going to take and just continue to play some chess here. Okay, let's just take back. We need to improve this rook. This rook is not really doing anything. So eventually getting this rook back to d8 would be an idea. Okay, rook to c1 was played. And I'm going to play queen to a5 with the idea of just connecting my rooks. I'm also targeting his unprotected pawn on a2. So you could see I gain a little tempo. It's not much though, to be honest. But I also have another idea that I just saw. Okay, the idea that I just saw, I think he made it a bit easier for me because the queen no longer guards the knight and the bishop. And because the bishop is the only defender of the knight and I forced him to play pawn to g3, weakening his dark squares, I could win some material here. Now, okay, something we spoke about when it comes to tactic is first evaluate the position, then look for move on the opponent's half of the board. These moves are your checks, your captures, and your threats. With that being said, rook takes e2 is a removing the guard tactic. Because once I play rook takes e2, rook takes e2, we take on f3. I'm worried about rook to e7 though, because it hits the unprotected knight, it threatens mate, but bishop to d5 hits the queen. And if pawn c4, bishop to e6, and if pawn d5, yeah, let's just take it. It's free material. It's slightly risky though, I'm not gonna lie, but not necessarily free material. It's just an extra point. So rook takes, bishop takes. He needs to play rook to e7. And then after bishop d5, he needs to play c4. And then after bishop e6, he needs to play d5. If he plays it like that, then I'm going to be forced to find some very strong defensive move. So rook to e7 threatens the knight, threatens mate. Let's pull the bishop back to d5, defend the mate, attack the queen, and then he needs to play pawn to c4. Okay, pawn c4, I'm thinking about playing queen to d2. Nah, that won't work. Pawn c4, bishop e6, pawn d5. So pawn c4, have to play bishop e6, and then pawn d5. Okay, pawn d5. All right, how do we do this now? If I take on d5, because I'm already ahead by 1 point. If I take on d5, he takes on d5. I take on d5, hit the queen. That's how I do it. So I was thinking about knight c5 though, but that shouldn't work. So we take on d5, he takes on d5, we take on d5, hit the queen, forcing the queen to move somewhere, and then it gives us another move to defend our knight. So let's just take on d5. Taking on d5 also opens this file for his rook, so we still have to be very careful. Okay, he took on d5. Let's just take, hit the queen. Very strong bishop, by the way, especially since he has weaknesses on the light squares. And then he plays queen to c3. So he's basically trying to get the queens off the board because his rook is also attacking my knight. I'm ahead by 2 points though, so I have no issues whatsoever getting the queens off the board. I need to be careful though. I need to be careful. Okay, I have a plan. Let's trade the queens. Once he plays rook takes, my knight is under attack, so I have to pull the bishop back to e6. No. Yes. Pulling the bishop back to e6 seems to be weird because it allows rook to c7. If I had pulled the bishop back to c6, he would have sacked his rook and then take on d7. But once I put my bishop on e6, this rook on e7 is actually trapped. So yes, he's able to play rook c7, and both of his rooks are on my seventh rank. But now I'm going to play rook to d8 and guard my knight. And it looks like I have a very passive position, and he's now going to take on b7, and then he's going to take on a7, which he is. But once I hit him with the move king to f8, his rook is trapped, which means he's now forced to sacrifice his rook for my knight or my bishop. It's best if he sacked the rook for, well, it would have been best if he sacked the rook for the bishop, and then when I take, he take the pawn. Because no once he takes here, I just need to take with the rook, and I'm guarding my a pawn. Plus, he shouldn't be trading. Like if he trades, it's just over. And if he checks, I play king up, a2 is hanging. This is just gonna be a easy conversion. Yeah, taking is just game over, bro. Like I've said this so many times, like you cannot be down by a piece and then trading the pieces off the board unless you're just giving up and you're like, okay, I can't win the game. And if that's the case, just resign. If you're going to trade the last piece off the board and you're down in material, or if the opponent is going to be forcing you to trade the last piece off the board and you're down in material, just resign. You know, it's best to do that. Okay, f4. Because the kings are already centralized, I'm now just trying to fix the pawns. So once he runs out of pawn moves, he's going to be forced to move his king, and then my king is going to be able to enter into his position. In fact, now I'm able to play bishop b5, checking his king, and if the king runs to this direction, I enter this way, and if the king runs to this direction, I enter. Well, I don't necessarily want to enter this way, but it's fine. Let's just enter this way. I'm just going to eat all his pawns. Okay, king went back. Let's go for the pawns. And okay, this should just be game. I'm going to take all his pawns, promote him to a queen, and then checkmate his king. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And this is not going to help him. He just doesn't have enough time to take my pawn and then get time to promote his pawn because now I basically have a queen on the board. Okay, let's keep pushing. Let's take. Now I play bishop to d5 and that pawn is not going anywhere. So I'm the only one who's going to have a queen. So he plays king to d6. Let's just put our queen on the board. And he finally resigns. More CARO-KANN defense against 1300 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1300. Let's play some more CARO-KANN defense. And by the way, if you guys want to play against me, remember all you need to do, leave a comment with your username. If you did it in another video, you could still do it in this video because I usually check the recent video. Just your username and your ratings. So that way, if I want someone to play, I just send a message and that's how I set up the games. Now, we're playing the exchange version of the CARO-KANN, as we spoke of. The most popular version of the CARO-KANN, to be honest. Knight c3, we play knight f6. Step 1 is to develop both of the knights. Step 2, get the light squared bishop out so that way you're able to get the dark squared bishop out. So let's do that. Okay, I've faced someone who plays h3 followed by g4, and that was actually very aggressive. Pawn g4, bishop g6, knight e5 is very aggressive, but you guys see how I defend against this and just continue with my development. So it's not like it's dangerous too much. Queen to f3. Looks like he's trying to get out of the pin. I mean, bishop back to g6 immediately hits the queen anyways, but it's not time for that. Let's be principled first. Let's get our king out the center of the board. Oh, that was his idea. He plays knight d5, which means if I play bishop back to g6, he's still gonna take, and he's applying pressure to my pinned knight. Okay, that's fine. I mean, queen to c7 should now work. Usually, queen c7 won't work if bishop f4 puts the bishop on the same diagonal as the queen. But if I play queen c7 and he plays bishop f4, I'm able to play bishop d6 and I'm fine. If he plays knight takes, I take with the pawn, hit the bishop, and I'm fine. So bishop f4, bishop is on the same diagonal as my queen. We play bishop d6. I'm also attacking the knight 3 times. He's guarding it twice. I'm not able to win it though because my knight is pinned. But once I castle my king, it's a different story. Queen to g3, it's pretty aggressive. It's very aggressive. There's all kind of threats here though. There's just all kind of threats. Because what I was thinking about is just to put my bishop back to g6. But if I put my bishop back to g6, there's knight takes g6. And if I take his bishop first, he takes with the knight. And if I take here, he takes my bishop. Okay. I think I have to, if I have to defend the pawn this way, then I'm going to have to castle on the queen side. Okay, let's play rook to g8 and guard the pawn. Maybe I could have castled, but if castle there's queen takes and my knight would have been under attack, and that's too much. Now, the only thing I'm afraid of now is knight takes e6, and if knight c6, bishop takes f4 hits the queen, he plays. Oh, wait, what? Knight c6, bishop f4 hits the queen. Knight e5 is a check. Oh yeah, this is losing. That's crazy. This is lost. It's he missed it, but it was lost. Ouch. Okay, where did I go wrong in this opening? Here, when he played queen d3, I just wasn't expecting him to move the knight. I probably should have just pulled back and hit the queen. So something that you guys need to keep in mind. I don't think he's winning anymore though, because now I'm able to castle my king. And once I castle my king, if he takes no, then I take hit the queen. So let's get the king out the center of the board. But in the exchange version of the CARO-KANN, your king actually needs to be castled on the king side and you need to attack on the queen side. So usually stuff like this happens when stuff happens, you know? So bishop takes c6. Let's just take back the bishop. This should be fine. King is slightly exposed, but my goal is just to get some pieces off the board. I think he's the one who is currently attacking. So my goal here is just to neutralize his attack. Okay, and then he plays rook to e1. He's getting all his pieces in the game. Okay, let's put bishop back to g6 to attack this pawn. Like personally, I think this knight is better than this bishop, to be honest. So I don't mind losing this bishop for this knight. And if it happens, I also get to trade some pieces off the board. And whenever you're under attack, it's best to trade. Like I mean, technically, I'm not under attack. But if someone is gonna attack someone, it's him gonna attack me. It's not gonna be the other way around. So he did take. Now we take back, and if the bishop takes, we just take. So let's actually take with the queen here. I'm actually going to just go into the end game. Like, once I'm able to go in the end game, my pawn structure is going to be solid. The only downside of my pawn structure here, to be honest, is my backward pawn on c6. But if in any universe he allows me to play c5, then I'm going to be fine. He decided to keep the queens on the board. That's a good decision, by the way. You don't want to trade queens whenever you're attacking. So that was not bad. Now what I need to do is to get my king to safety. So here's my plan. Okay. I think he wants to play queen to a3 check. And if I play c5, there's knight b4 hits the queen. Okay, let's play king to b7. King b7, knight a4. I should be able to play knight e7. So we're under attack here. So I'm going to be showing you guys how to defend if you're under attack. So knight a4, knight is heading to c5. Let's play knight d7. Basically, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to prevent any pieces from coming on my half of the board. Now, usually, whenever someone is attacking you, they have pieces on your half of the board. And what you want to do in that scenario is to neutralize these pieces. Now, pawn to b4 would actually be a very nice move here because I want to play pawn c5. Maybe not now because he has queen to b5 and that could lose my pawn. But if I'm able to play something like king to a8, rook to b8, then it shouldn't be too hard for me. But the guy's 1300, he's playing strong. And what I've noticed is I think there's a huge gap between 1200 and 1300. I think that's where real chess begins. Like, I'm not sure though. But whenever I play 1200 rated players, it's just okay. And it's a regular game. But then from 1300 going up, like 1300 players really give me a challenge. So I'm sure there's a lot of persons at 1200. It's hard for them to get to 1300. Maybe to get to 1300, you have to play some real chess. And then he plays a3. The plan is to play b4. I want to play c5, but then there's check. And if I move, there's pawn takes. So he is going to play b4, and the pawn could get to b5. Let's just play king to a8, though. Let me just hide my king behind my pawn, and then maybe I'm going to play rook to b8. But once he plays pawn, okay, if he plays pawn to b4, I was thinking about playing knight here, but that shouldn't work. Mm, okay, that was bad for sure. That was for sure, but I don't know why he would pull the knight back, bro. You're attacking. You should attack. You don't attack someone by pulling pieces back. Now I'm able to play pawn c5, and I'm not afraid of knight b5 anymore because my king is now safe. So if he plays knight b5, I just put my queen somewhere, let's say b6. And then I'm threatening c4 to win his knight. And if he takes, I take, and I have good control over the center. Okay, so he attacks my queen. Still need to be a bit careful though. Let's play queen b6. He also needs to be careful. Like, my rook on g8 is not doing anything. Eventually, I may want to play rook h8. I just need to try to neutralize his attacks here. So pawn a4 would be a nice move to protect his knight. He needs to be careful. Again, if he allows me to play c4, then I'm winning a piece. He did find a4. And as we said, this guy is playing some chess. Now, do we take? I think I'm going to take. I think I'm going to take because the best way to counterattack a flank attack is by countering in the center of the board. So now the center is going to be a bit mobile. Eventually I should be able to push my pawns up the board. I'm not going to do it now, but sometime in the future, eventually. If he decides to take with the knight, I'm not going to take on b2. He plays b3. He didn't take back the pawn. Can't I just play e5 and guard the pawn? Sir, I don't want to be greedy. I don't want to be greedy though. That's the thing. Like, if I play e5, there's c3. Well, that's a pawn though. A pawn is hard to get. If I take, he takes. Why would he play b3 though? I still don't understand b3. Maybe I'm just gonna give him back the pawn, but I don't understand b3. Maybe he wants to play a4 and attack my queen. Let's play rook to c8 and try to start some counterattack on the c file. I'm gonna try to especially target his c2 pawn. Okay, so he took back the pawn. Now we need to. What do we need to do? This is coming. Let's play queen c5 or rook. Let's play queen c5. I want to play queen c3. Like, if I'm able to trade the queens off the board, then I'm very, very solid. Knight f6 to e4 is also an idea. My king is safe. Like, it's not the safest king, but it's safe for now. He needs to find some ways to open the position and get to my king easier. Okay, rook to c1. The guy is listening to exactly what I said. Now, knight e5 hits the queen. The queen has to stay on the knight, but it's not hard to stay on the knight. So let's play queen to c3. We don't want to allow him to easily play pawn to c4 because then it's going to be opening lines, and then I prefer to get the queens off the board. No, I'm fine. Now his pawn here is weak, and if he allows me to play rook to c8 and then chase away this knight, then I could be winning his pawn on c2. Okay, he's trying to get his king in the game. Let me just get my rook in the game. It's funny because all of a sudden, both of my rooks are just way better than his rooks. And then now he plays a weird looking move like rook to a2, which means this is now unprotected. And because that is unprotected, I should be able to win a pawn here if I just play pawn to e5, because the knight guards the b3 pawn, but not this pawn. So I'm going to play pawn e5 hits the knight, and then once the knight no longer guards the pawn, I just take the pawn. So for example, knight b5. Wait, wait, wait. If I take the pawn, he moves the rook, and this is under attack. Yo, this guy. Okay, we can't take the pawn. That was premature. What? Okay, let's play rook c5. Let's guard the pawn. He's not able to play c3, which is good. I'm I should try to trap his knight or something, but I'm not gonna. Okay, he plays b4 to hit the rook. If I play rook c4, he plays knight to d6, and that's a fork. So I have to play rook c6. He only has a minute on the clock though, so I kind of know that I'm gonna win this game. But like leave a comment for the guy in the 1300 region, like give it up for him. I mean, the guy played well, I'm not gonna lie. Okay, so he got his king in the game. Pawn to b6, pawn to a6. Let's neutralize the knight, force his knight on the edge of the board. And now let's play rook back to c3 here. Still not seeing any huge. I know that my rooks are better than his though. King to d2, let's play knight f6. Let's get the knight in the game. I'm trying to play knight e4. And then after knight b1, I play knight e4, check, guard my rook. But this is where I'm going to start gaining an advantage. Not because I'm just so strong and I outplayed the guy. The guy just has no time on the clock. So he moves away the king. He left this unprotected. Let's just take with check. If he plays king here, I go back. And he's not able to, well, he could take. I just go back. And the whole point is if he takes, now I take with check and I'm winning his rook. That's a nice idea. But guy played well. So he moves his rook. Now we play rook to g3 because we need to attack pawns in the endgame. And king to f1. I think he needs to play here, which he found. Now I'm going to play knight to c3, just trying to trade the pieces off the board, seeing that I'm ahead by a pawn. And now I'm just better because his rooks are doing defensive role. My rooks are doing attacking role. Push is fine. That's fine. Let's play a5 actually. I don't want any drama. If he pushes, then I move. He moves the king. Let's play d4. The plan is to play d3 check, win the pawn. He moves the king again, but I'm still gonna play pawn to d3 because he's not able to take, seeing that he loses the rook. Pawn to b6 threatens to fork, so we have to. Do we? Nah, we don't have to do anything. I could takes rook takes king takes king up, and then it's just a winning king and pawn ending. Yeah, this is just conversion. So we take with check. We're trading everything off the board, and then it's just going to be a winning king and pawn ending. So once he takes, we take here, and then once he takes, we go here. I'm only ahead by one pawn for now, but once I take, I'm ahead by two pawns, and the end game is now just completely winning. However, he used this time wisely, and he got a very good position. So again, give it up for the guy in the 1300 region. But because he only has a second on the clock, we're going to be playing more CARO-KANN defense against 1400 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1400. Let's play some more solid CARO-KANN. So d4, we play d5 here. Exchange, advance, classical stuff, fantasy variation. Okay, he's playing some classical stuff. Let's take on d4. We're always going to be taking on d4. And then after knight takes e4, we play the move knight to f6, just immediately attacking the knight. And usually if they take, which is what he did, we're going to be taking with the e pawn so that way the bishop gets easily developed. Now, this is called the Tartakov variation of the CARO-KANN. Now, after knight f3, we play bishop d6. And just to let you guys know, at the lower level, knight f3 is actually not good at the high level, which is why people play bishop d3, pawn c3, queen c2. And then he plays queen d3, which to me is weird. Because what's the plan with this bishop? Usually this bishop goes to d3. Let me just get my king out the center of the board. I'm just doing what I know I should do. Remember the plan, guys. Like, what's the plan with this knight on b8? And there's actually a knight a6 to c7 to d5 plan. There's a knight d7 to f8 plan. It all depends on what the opponent plays. So based on what I'm seeing here, it looks like he's trying to castle his king on the queen side, which means it's going to be a very aggressive game. So let's play the flexible rook to e8. I mean, rooks need files. We're always going to be putting our rook on e8. But let's see if he's going to get his king on the queen side, which he did. Now that he castles his king on the queen side, it could give me a chance to start some attack. That's the thing. Yeah, there's so many ways to start some attack here. Okay, first move I'm going to play is knight a6. Yes, I'm putting my knight on the edge of the board, but I want to play either knight b4, hit the queen and then centralize the knight, or knight c7 to d5. So he decides to play pawn to a3 to prevent my knight from going to b4, which is fair, but he's pushing pawns on the side that his king is on. He's creating what is called a hook. So that could be an issue for him. And because he created the hook, I'm actually going to play pawn. Okay, let's not do that just yet. Let's be principled. Let's develop first. I want to develop my pieces first, but we're going to be going for an attack here, especially since it's opposite side castles. Whose attack is going to be faster? Because that's what determined the strategy in a chess game where it's opposite side castles. And okay, let me tell you guys some advanced strategy when you play the Tartakova variation. First advanced strategy is this bishop. If you're able to play b5 and then bishop d5, that's very good. Now he's playing queen c3. I'm assuming he's trying to take my knight on c6, and then once I takes, he plays queen takes. Personally, I don't even think that is good for him because he's giving up his bishop here. He's opening lines on the side that his king is on. But I'm not seeing how I'm going to be punishing it. So let's continue with the strategic plan of putting the bishop on d5. There's also no pawn to c4 right now, which is why I wasn't forced to play pawn to b5. And if he decides to give up his bishop for a knight and expose his own king, then that's on him. So he puts his rook on e1. Fair enough. Very fair. Now we're going to start our attack with pawn to b5. And remember, guys, knight on the rim is still dim. I'm not going to keep my knight on the edge of the board for too long. I'm not really seeing where I'm going to put it as yet because the bishop is on d5 and I really like this bishop on d5. Like, guys, if you're going to play the Tartakova variation, bishop g4 is good when the king is castled on the king side, but there's also bishop e6 to d5, which is also very good, especially if you play b5 and you don't have to worry about any c4. So bishop to d3, I want to play b4 to hit the queen. But he's just going to move the queen. And then once he moves the queen, my knight is going to be under attack. So I want to prepare it. So let's start by playing queen to b6. I want you guys to know how principled I'm playing. Like my rooks are already connected and we're on move 13. I mean, he could also say the same thing. Like the guy developed pretty quickly. But I have a hook. He doesn't have a hook. And this is why you don't push pawns on the side that your king is on. Because if I had at least played pawn to g6, he would immediately play h4, h5, and it's called a hook. Whenever the opponent push a pawn on the side that their king's on, you're going to take advantage of that pawn, use that pawn as a hook, and open lines for your pieces. Now, funny enough, I think he needs to play pawn b4, which I wouldn't mind. It's another hook. I just need to move my knight out the way and play pawn a5. You see how hook works now? And then he plays king to d2. Now he's trying to run with his king. And because he's trying to run with his king, he lost his queen, Mr. 1400. What type of move is this? I haven't even started the attack and he's trying to run. At least counter attack, bro. Because the queen and the king is on the same line. So once I play b4 and he takes the pawn, the queen is going to be pinned. But for the person who is saying that he doesn't have to take the pawn and I'm playing hope chess, once I put my pawn on b4, the queen is trapped. What else is he gonna do with the queen? If he puts the queen here or here, the bishop gets it. If he puts the queen here, the bishop or the knight gets it. That's GG's, bro. He took the pawn, and once we take, there goes his queen. Okay, so he first took on a6. I'm not going to take the bishop though. I'm first going to take the queen with check. And then once he takes back, that's when we take the bishop. We're ahead by an entire queen. So this is not just game. And the opponent resigns. More CARO-KANN defense against 1,500 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1,500. Let's play some solid CARO-KANN. Knight f3, let's play pawn to d5. We're always going to be playing pawn to d5 on the next move, regardless. And we're now seeing an exchange version of the CARO-KANN, which is one of the CARO-KANNs that you guys are going to be seeing a lot. So it's very important that you guys know the plans here. But it's very easy. He plays bishop e2. He's trying to get his king castled very, very quickly. But let's just play knight f6 followed by knight c6. Like, we're always going to be doing this. Like, playing the exchange CARO-KANN, just get the two knights out first. Now we're going to be getting the bishops out. Now, be careful how you get the bishops out because I'm sure we want to castle here. And because we want to castle, we may want to play moves like e6, bishop e7, and castle. But if we play e6 now, it blocks in our light squared bishop. With that being said, we need to play either bishop to g4 or bishop to f5. I don't think it matters too much, to be honest. Let's just put the bishop on g4 because, it's putting a piece on the opponent's half of the board instead of putting it on f5. But they're both good moves. Just ensure that you get your bishop outside of the pawn chain before playing pawn to e6. And then from here, you're going to put the bishop on either e7 or d6 and then castle king. Pawn h3, we're not going to be taking this. I've seen a lot of persons take this now, which is fine, by the way. But we're not going to be doing it because one reason why it's fine is because we take the knight and the bishop takes. His bishop is not really active, pointing towards d5. But let's remain principled, knowing that bishops are better than knights, and just pull the bishop back to maintain the pressure that we have on his knight. And if his bishop goes to g5, then that's usually the sign that our bishop is going on e7. And if the bishop goes to f4, then, we could always put the bishop on d6. But if you still want to put the bishop on e7, that's up to you. So knight h2 was played, which is a weird move. He's trying to trade the bishops off the board, and I prefer to take the bishop rather than taking the knight. And one thing I notice is once I take the bishop and his queen takes, his knight on g h2 is also not on, the best square. I'm not winning here or anything. The plans in the exchange version of the CARO-KANN is not necessarily to attack on the king side. So let's just play bishop e7 and castle the king. And what you need to learn is the plans in the exchange version of the CARO-KANN is to go for a minority attack. Now, the opponent plays pawn to f4, which is very interesting because I think he wants to play f5 and start an immediate attack on my king. So let me just play the move queen to d7 first. It's just temporarily putting a hold on him playing pawn to f5. Now, what I'm noticing is his e4 square is now very weak. Very weak. This is actually the definition of a weakness because a weakness in chess is a pawn or square that cannot be guarded by another pawn. So instead of castling my king, I mean, why not just break some principles here and play knight e4? It's not like he's been developing his pieces. He's been playing pawn moves, knight moving more than once, pawn move, pawn move. Let's jump in with e4. And the reason why I'm doing this is because it kind of makes it harder for him to develop because I was just about to say, no, he's not able to develop his knight on d2 because of the drawback mistake that it creates. Because now that he plays the move knight to d2, the knight no longer guards the pawn on c3. So now that we take this pawn on c3, we're already ahead by a pawn, but it does not end there. He's also losing the d4 pawn because the pawn on c3 was being guarded or was guarding the pawn on d4, and his queen is under attack. Now, it really doesn't matter what move he plays next. I'm still going to be taking on d4. Even if he attacks my knight, I'm going to be taking on d4. Okay, queen to g4 was played. Some offense is the best defense type of business. He's applying pressure to g7. I mean, taking on d4, it's a pawn at the end of the day, but king safety is important. If I takes, queen takes, there's no bishop f6. There's still this pawn f5 idea that I need to be on the lookout for. But let's just get the king out the center of the board. The goal was to castle anyways. I was also thinking about playing bishop f6, but I think he's still going to be losing his d4 pawn anyways. Knight to f3. So he decides to guard the pawn. But here's the thing. He's only guarding it once. I'm already attacking it once, which means I just need to find clever ways to apply more attacks to the pawn. And there is more attacks to the pawn because I already have one piece on his half of the board. So it's not hard to just look for forcing moves here. Now it's slightly tricky though, because one thing I notice is if I check on the king move and then I take, he's able to play bishop b2. So I just need to be careful. I don't think it works though, because I always have bishop f6. So let's go for it. Knight e2. If he moves the king, I takes. Knight takes bishop d2. And then there's also always knight f5 or bishop f6. I'm just trying not to get checkmated on g2 now. Another thing I'm noticing is the opportunity to check his king on g3, and that would be a fork. Now, it's not possible because his queen guards it. With that being said, how should we be thinking here? If the knight goes to g3, it's a fork. Queen guards the g3 square. So just find a way to chase away the queen. And that's how I'm going to hit him with the move pawn to f5. And this is just me setting up or removing the guard tactic. But it could also be winning his queen. It's actually way stronger than I thought. Because I don't even care about the guy's rook anymore. Like, where's he going to put the queen? If he puts the queen here, it's free. If he puts the queen here, it's free. If he puts the queen here, it's forked. So that's GG's, bro. He did put the queen on h5, and this is now just a very nice royal fork, winning the queen, forking the king and the rook. King has to move, and that's an entire queen. And the opponent resigns. More CARO-KANN defense against 1600 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1600. Let's play some more solid CARO-KANN. Knight f3, we play pawn d5. And then the opponent plays pawn d3. Now, already that's a slight mistake. Like, if you guys are watching this, I can always take on e4 and then take the queen, trade the queens off the board, prevent his king from castling, and then I have a slight advantage. But because I want you guys to learn more, let me just continue by developing my pieces normally here. I want to play e6 or just move my e pawn. And you guys should already know that because I want to develop my dark squared bishop, I'm first going to get the light squared bishop out. So he plays bishop to e2. Now I'm gonna play. Do I play pawn e6 first or do I play knight f6? I don't think it matters. So let's play pawn to e6 here. And then I'm going to play knight f6, knight d7, maybe bishop d6, but I have to be aware of any possible forks that he may have. So his king is castled and safe. Okay, you know what? Let's just play knight f6. Let's just apply pressure to the pawn on e4. And if he plays pawn to e5, we play knight d7 and attack the pawn again. And then that's going to kind of force him to establish a pawn chain on e5, d4, and c3. And then I'm going to start attacking those pawn chains. So it's going to be very similar to how you would attack the pawn chain in the French. But the upside is I'm not going to have the bad light squared bishop, but he didn't really go for that though. So let's just take with the c pawn, and we're actually going to be playing this like an exchange variation of the CARO-KANN. Like taking on d5 was actually bad because if you guys look on all my pieces, it's going to be very easy for me to just play knight c6, bishop e7 and castle, or bishop d6 and castle. His light squared bishop is bad. Like this pawn needs to be on d4. So taking was definitely bad. Then he plays knight e5, which is fine. He's attacking my bishop. I don't really want to waste time pulling the bishop back though. So we have to take the bishop on e2. Now he's going to take back with the queen. And from here, it's just a matter of finishing our development. Let's put the bishop on d6, applying some pressure to the knight. Bishop to e7 was also fine. But mainly what I'm trying to do is just get my king up the center of the board first. Pawn to d4 was played. Good move. Now I'm going to get my king out the center of the board. There is this pin that is usually very annoying, I'm not going to lie, which is why you guys always see me putting my bishop on e7. But let's see, like that pin shouldn't be too bad. Knight c3 was played, and I'm not going to use the time to play knight c6, just finishing my development. If he takes, then I'm just going to take back. I mean, if he does something weird, I'm probably going to play h6 to prevent the pin. Because if he does, well, it's not no. He's not going to pin now because I'm also attacking d4, which means I'm probably going to play h6 more than likely. Because if he pins, the only way to get out of the pin is to either play h6, g5, and that exposes my king, or I have to pull the bishop back to e7, and I don't want to be moving the same pieces more than once. And he did go for the pin. The thing is, though, he went for the pin at the wrong time, though, because that's a free pawn, bro. That's a pawn. It's actually tricky, but let's take the pawn first and attack the queen. Let me tell you what I'm seeing from a tactical perspective. Not no, because I'm going to take his queen with check if he doesn't move his queen. But I'm seeing a scenario where he takes my knight. And if I take with the queen trying not to expose my king, he forks on d7. So I may have to eliminate his knight, giving up my bishop for a knight. But, I'm ahead by a pawn, so should be a bargain. Wait, I think he's actually in trouble. I didn't even see how strong my move was because I'm also targeting c2 and I'm targeting his knight. This is a removing the guard tactic. His queen is overworked. How is he going to guard both c2 and the knight at the same time? It's impossible. If queen e3 guards the knight, that's a fork. If queen d2 guards the pawn, he loses the knight. It's over. So he decides to play the move queen to d3. Okay, now queen to d3. He's attacking my knight. Let's just take guarding my knight. I'm ahead by a piece. It's kind of tricky though. It's definitely tricky because he could do a removing the guard tactic himself, but not with f4. F4 is bad. Rook e1 makes more sense. All right, I'm gonna trick him for sure though. I'm gonna trick him for sure because if he plays f4, he's not able to take due to the pin. So all I need to do now is to guard my bishop. Oh, but if I guard my bishop, yeah, let's guard the bishop. So first, let's guard the bishop. We're still not afraid of f4. Maybe he thinks f4 I takes. Nah, f4 is just not gonna work. Like he wants to find ways to remove my bishop, but I'm not seeing it. And if he allows me, I'm just well, he resigns. More CARO-KANN defense against 1,700 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,700. Let's play some more CARO-KANN defense. Pawn d5, let's play d5 after d4. Knight c3, we take on e4. You see how fast he's playing this? Maybe he plays the alien gambit or something. When they do it that fast, it's like the witty alien fever. If he takes on f6 though, then I take with the e pawn. We're gonna be facing an alien gambit, guys, and it's very important. If you're gonna be playing the CARO-KANN with alien gambit being alive, you're gonna be with witty alien being alive, you're gonna be facing the alien gambit. Now The plan is to sacrifice on f7. I'm going to play h6, welcoming the sacrifice on f7. And this is the alien gambit. Now, there's a way to refute this line, and that's what I'm going to be showing you guys. And it starts off with king takes f7, and then after knight to f3. All you need to remember that is we want to be putting a lot of pressure on his pawn on d4 here. So we're going to be playing the move pawn c5, and we're just going to be targeting the d4 pawn. Knight e5 check anytime they check us. If they check us with the knight, if they check us with the bishop. Well, if they check us with the bishop, we block with the pawn. But if they check us with the knight, the king goes to g8. And another thing I want you guys to keep in mind is if the knight ever goes to g6 attacking this rook, we're going to be giving them that rook because we're already ahead by a knight. And if they take the rook, we're going to have two knights for the rook, which is an advantage. Now, what I wanted to say is whenever the bishop goes to c4 with check, we always block with the pawn on e6. Now, I'm already targeting his pawn on d4 twice, so I'm threatening to win a pawn. So let's see what he's going to play here. Okay, pawn to c3 was played. I'm ahead by a piece, by the way. I'm trying to trade some pieces off the board here, to be honest. So, like, knight c6, I'm sure is a good move to neutralize this knight. Like, I'm sure that is a very good move. But what if I take on d4 first? Well, if I take on d4, he's probably going to just castle. But if I take on d4 and he takes back, I check. If he blocks with the bishop, I could even take on d4, hit the knight. And if he takes my bishop, I take his knight with check. So that should be an idea. But I know that if I take on d4, he could castle. Well, then I play knight c6 though. So let's take on d4. I think it's best if he castles here because my queen is pinned. So I'm not going to be able to take back. If he takes, which he did, now there's both knight c6 and bishop to b4. Like, I want you guys to notice, I'm just trying to play as actively as I possibly can. And he shouldn't be trading like the pieces off the board like this. So I'm very comfortable here. Let's start by playing the move bishop to b4 check. Now he has options. Do I move my king, preventing myself from castling, or do I block with the bishop and allow me to take here? Like, I mean, maybe I don't want to give him the bishop here, though, because bishop d2, if I takes, he takes on b4, and then I take the knight with check, and then he blocks with the bishop. The knight c6 is a tempo on this bishop, and then he moves the bishop, and then bishop d7, and I'm fine. Like, it should be fine. If he blocks with the bishop, though, I could also just take queen takes and then play knight c6. Already using a lot of time off his clock thinking now because he doesn't want to be trading too many pieces, and he's also going to be losing pawns and all of that stuff. And by the way, if you guys want to play against me, you leave your username in the comment and the ratings beside it. Because what I do is, once I post a video, I go back to that video and I check the comments of the persons who respond, and then I just try to message them on Chesscom to set up games with them. For example, if I can't find a play at a certain ratings. So he did decide to play King F1 because if he blocks with the bishop, he would have lost the pawn. But once you play against the alien gambit, this knight is always going to be going to c6 because now I have two pieces attacking d4 and I'm targeting the knight on e5. And again, if the knight goes to g6 attacking my rook, I'm going to be giving him the rook. A lot of times, queen to e8 is a strong move, and then once the knight takes, we could just take. But in this position, if he plays knight to g6, I'm I'm very likely just going to play queen takes d4, and the advantage is going to be huge. What I'm expecting is knight back to f3, but this is like some alien gambit gone wrong type of business. Now, I want you guys to have a look on my light squared bishop. Maybe you think my light squared bishop is bad. If you think my light squared bishop is bad, you're correct. But I think it's doing a good defensive role guarding e6. Knight takes c6. Let's play pawn takes c6. The goal is to trade, and that's another diagonal for my light squared bishop. So if I could like maybe play queen b6, bishop a6, and pin his bishop so that way he's not able to take, that's more pieces coming off the board. And if I'm really uncomfortable about what's happening on e6, I'm just gonna put my knight on d5. Like, I'm so comfortable here because for one, I'm ahead by a piece, and two, his king is on f1. Like, what more can I ask for? Maybe to get this rook in the game, but let's see. So he plays bishop to e3. It's fair. It's a fair move. Bishop e3. I'm thinking just knight d5 here. Just centralize the knight. I'm also attacking his bishop, which I'm attacking this bishop. So is he gonna move that bishop again? And he has stuff to take care of. Like, I need to get my rook in the game, but he also needs to get his rook in the game and his king to safety. If he give up his bishop for a knight, that's just perfect for me. So he plays a3. Now, I was actually about to play queen f6 and just blunder the entire game, thinking knight e6 is e3 is winning. But if I play queen f6, he's just going to take this knight first and I'm lost. I could play knight takes e3, by the way, just to trade more pieces off the board. But I mean, I don't think it benefits me a lot to do that. So I'm actually going to pull the bishop all the way back to e7. I don't care about this bishop on c4 anymore because I'm never, ever, ever, ever going to be moving my knight from d5. Like, unless he blunders his bishop or anything. I prefer to play bishop g5 and then trade, especially if he allows me to take with the h pawn and then my rook becomes active. That would be nice. Thing about playing against the alien gambit, you also have to be very strategic because you're gonna have some pieces that's not really doing anything, and you're gonna have to find ways to get those pieces in the game. So queen to f3 was played. For example, first example, this rook on b8. Like, I mean, why not just play rook to b8 and attack the pawn? Or maybe I shouldn't do it just yet. Let's stick to the game plan first. Let's stick to the game plan and let's play bishop to g5. Because rook to b8 is fine, but I don't want him to like ever have the opportunity to play queen to something like queen g3 and attack my rook, especially since my rooks aren't connected. So I still have to be careful. But for now, the plan is just to trade. The more we trade, the closer we get to the win. And then he plays rook to e1. And what I'm seeing is this is winning because I could just trade everything off the board right now at this moment. Like, again, bishops are better than knights, but my knight here is just so strong. So once I take on e3 and he takes back on e3, queen to f6 forces the queens off the board. Okay, maybe I need to reevaluate that because once the pawn is on e3, my knight is not going to be as strong as it seems because he's going to be able to play pawn to e4. Okay, maybe now is the time. Come on, let me think about it. Let me think about it. Okay, actually, let's play bishop to d7. I'm gonna play bishop to d7 because there's a little trick in the position. There's a little trick in the position. So let me develop my pieces first. I want to play queen to b6, targeting this pawn, then take on e3, and then once he takes back on e3, because the king and the queen is on the same line, rook to f8 is going to be pinning the queen to the king. So that's a little trick that I have. And it's not like I'm losing or anything. So I'm not trying to rush anything. Like if he takes, I'm still going to take back, maybe even with the pawn as we discussed. And if I take with the pawn, yes, I have double pawns, but I have no bad pieces. Right now, we both have a rook that is bad, but in terms of good pieces, I just have more pieces on the chessboard, which is why I may want to play something like rook to b8, but I want to go queen b6, rook to f8. That would be even better. And then he moves the rook back to c1. Also weird. Maybe, I don't know what he's trying to do, to be honest. So we're just going to be going for the plan. Queen to b6, attack the unprotected pawn. But we're secretly not trying to take that unprotected pawn. We're actually trying to play rook to f8. And if we play rook to f8, he's going to be losing so much material. I think he needs to take on g5 here. I'm just going to take back with the pawn. No biggie. And then I'm going to go, okay, he saw all of that. And then so he basically pulls the queen back and guard the pawn, which means, do I take and then still play rook f8 or do I just play rook f8? I'm just going to play rook f8. I want him to take because if he takes both of my rooks are active and I'm gonna have zero bad pieces. So I'm chill. And then my knight is gonna get access to f4. So you see what he did? He moved his king off the same line as my rook. Hmm. Okay, I think we have a brilliancy here. I think we have a brilliancy here. So it's knight takes e3, pawn takes e3, and my rook covers the entire f file. And the queen is the only defender of e3 at this point. So if knight e3, pawn e3, I'm gonna play queen takes b2 and sacrifice my queen. And if queen takes b2, I'm going to play bishop takes e3 check, and then he has to block with the queen, and then I'm going to take the queen, and I'm winning. So knight e3 is very strong. My bishop on d7, still doing a great role guarding e6. Queen takes e3, queen takes b2. He doesn't have to take though, that's the thing. But hey, a pawn is a pawn at the end of the day. I'm going to sack my queen, knowing that he's going to be forced to sacrifice his queen. This is removing the guard. Okay, he saw it and then he decides to just defend his queen. But now we're trading. I'm not just ahead by what? 3 points. Clean piece. Both of us has a rook that is not doing anything. So the plan from here is to get the rooks in the game. So let's go king f7, king e7. He's also trying to get his rook in the game. Let's play king e7. and then he plays king h2, and then I'm gonna put my rook on. Let's play rook to b8. I want to ensure that I have control over the only two files on the board. And okay, he's trading. I'm gonna trade. That's a free pawn. I like the idea of trying to trade, but he's just gonna guard the pawn. So let's just take the free pawn, hit the rook, forking this pawn. Yeah, this is now over. Plus he has only 10 seconds on the clock. So that's it for the alien gambit. Let's oh, I almost gave a check on the black back rank and blundered my rook. Let's just roll the pass pawn. Okay, now we go to the back rank to pin the bishop, and then we attack the main defender. And then okay, he blundered his rook. I mean, he's just playing fast because he has no time. And with that being said, my opponent resigns. More CARO-KANN defense against 1,800 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,800. Let's play some CARO. Okay, pawn d4. Here we play pawn d5, and we're seeing an advanced version of the CARO-KANN. Let's play pawn c5, hitting the pawn, and then taking on c5 is actually the main theoretical way to deal with this as white. So that's actually very interesting. But will he know exactly what he's doing the whole time? Let's play knight c6, hit the pawn, and usually bishop b5 here is the move, because what he's basically trying to do, he's trying to hold on to the pawn. But what I've learned playing, this line for a while is I don't mind being down by a pawn against this, because eventually I'm going to be able to play pawn to b6, and then I'm going to be able to win back the pawn. So let's just play bishop to f5 and just develop normally. And usually they play pawn to b4, trying to hold on to the pawn. And then I'm just going to focus on my development. And I'm just going to develop all my pieces. He's going to try to consolidate the pawn and everything. And then I'm just going to play b6 and then start attacking his queen side. It's kind of like one of those Catalan variations where they win the pawn on c4, but you don't care. Now he plays a4 though. Now we have to be careful. Now we have to be very careful, because he is threatening to play g4 and trap my bishop. Now, queen to a5 check will never work, because once I play queen a5, which checks the king, hit the bishop, he has knight c3. And I could try to play d4, but once he takes, there's queen takes d4. He's currently threatening to play pawn to g4 and trap my bishop. So with that being said, I'm wondering if I should play h6 or h5. Let's play h5. Usually in these types of positions, they play bishop g5 to prevent me from playing pawn to e6, but let's see. So he develops the knight to f3. Let's play pawn to e6. Goal is to try to take back the pawn. And the move is definitely pawn to b4 here. And I'm obviously not able to take on b4 due to the pin. So let's see. There's also bishop to e3, which could be played in this position. Knight to d4. That's a good move, because not only is he attacking my bishop, he's also applying pressure to my pinned knight. I have to defend my pinned knight. So, okay, if I play queen c7, takes, then there's queen d5. So I'm going to play rook to c8, and then after takes, I'm able to keep my pawn on d5 guarded. But that was a very nice move that he played, because now my structure is all about the place. Isolated pawn, double pawns, and we still have to keep in mind that we're down by a pawn here. Usually I should have a pawn on e6. So let's see. Especially if he plays b4 here. If he plays b4, then that would be very annoying, or even bishop e3. Well, he decides to castle, which makes it a bit easier for me. I mean, for one, your rook no longer guards h4, bro, so that's a pawn. I'm not going to take that pawn, though, because if I take this pawn, then this pawn falls. I also need to be aware that my king is still in the center of the board. But let's just take on c5. I'm more than likely going to play something like knight e7. I'm not trying to get greedy and grab this pawn. Like, that pawn will always be weak. I need to just ensure that I'm not getting checkmated. Okay, knight c3 was played. Let's play knight e7. Yes, two attackers on my pawn. There's also d4, hit the knight. Wait, do I play d4? No, if d4, there's knight a5. So let's play knight e7. Position is equal. Structure is slightly off. And once he attacks my pawn on f5, if I have to play b6, then my dark squares are also going to be a bit weak. Okay, so he pins my knight. In just some cases, not now though, but you could say in some cases, he's threatening to win my pawn here. But from here, my goal is to neutralize his bishop. Neutralize the bishop. If he takes, I take. Yeah, let's neutralize the bishop first. first and foremost, let's just neutralize the bishop. What you need, okay, if he pulls the bishop back, I could take. There's bishop takes f5 though, so it's still tricky. Okay, bishop back to a4 is good. Like, I just wish I had my light squared bishop here. Bishop back to b3 is also coming. All right, how do we do this? How do we do this? Definitely pawn d4. I'm about to do something. Your opinion is your opinion. Think I'm able to win a pawn here. My king is in the center of the board. The guy has the bishop here. The pawn is a pawn at the end of the day. So here's what I'm seeing. Here's what I'm seeing. If I play b5, bishop back, I take, right? But then he's going to take. So first I'm going to play d4, hit the knight. There's no knight a4 anymore. There's no forward knight moves. So I'm expecting knight e2. And if he plays knight e2, I hit him with b5, bishop b3. Then I take on e5, and I'm going to be ahead by a pawn. And the good thing is if he tries to play rook e1, putting his rook on the same line as my king, I could get away with f6, hitting the bishop, guarding my knight. Okay. You see, he doesn't want to lose the pawn. Taking on c6 is also fine because if I take with the knight, I lose my queen. So I have to take with the rook or the pawn. Could take with the pawn, but how do we take? Okay, let's just take with the rook. And then after knight e2, I'm still gonna play queen to d5 because it unpins my knight and it attacks his pawn on e5. And if I could get him playing defensive move, that would be good for me. Oh, now his knight gets the a4 square. I mean, that's kind of suspicious though, bro. I'm not gonna lie. Your knight is on the edge of the board. Let me pull my bishop back to a7. That's suspicious. The knight on the edge of the board is on the edge of the board. The knight can't go here, 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 or here. If he allows me to play b5, then the knight is trapped. And if he plays b3, trying to create an escape square for the knight, then I'm happy. I mean, at least he's gonna be wasting a couple moves. For example, pawn b3, queen d5 hits the pawn. Maybe rook e1 guards the pawn, and then I put my knight somewhere. I don't know. Like I want to castle, but the moment I castle, I lose my h pawn. And if I play g6, then my dark squares are weak. He played queen to f3, which is just queen to f3 is a very nice move. Now, the good thing is I'm not greedy, right? So I'm not gonna play b5. But b5 does not win the knight because he's gonna take my knight. And then if I take his knight, I lose the rook. If I take his knight, I lose the queen. But I'm still going to play queen d5. That was the idea. Now, keep in mind, if he trades the queens off the board, which he's kind of forced to do it, if he trades the queens off the board, then I'm fine. I'm able to castle and everything. But if he moves the queen, then I should be able to hit him with pawn b5. So the queens are now traded. Is he going to get his knight? Oh my lord, I'm also threatening the unprotected pawn. Position just crumbles now. He has to, guy has to play b3. Has to. If he doesn't play b3, I play b5, and the knight is trapped. So pawn b3. Okay, pawn b3. If I take though, there's rook c1 though. There's actually rook c1. Even if he plays b3 and I play b5 and he plays knight b2 and I hit the knight, there's still rook c1. Because if I take the knight, he checks king up and he takes my rook. But he plays c4 instead, which means I'm just gonna take en passant, and we're ahead by a pawn, not a knight though. Okay, knight takes, we take, pawn takes, we takes, and then we're gonna castle. So this is fine. This is just an endgame with an extra pawn. Let's take the free pawn. It's gonna take some technique in order to win. I'm gonna castle my king. Usually the king is better centralized, but there's too many files. So rook to d8, now we castle the king. Nice, the king is safe. He's able to get his rook on my 7th rank, but I'm just concerned about not my king safety, but just getting all my pieces in the game. If he plays rook to d7, how do I respond to that now? Okay, I have an idea. I'm going to start with rook to c2 because offense is still the best defense at the end of the day. So let's play rook to c2, putting my rook on his 2nd rank. I have 2 pieces attacking f2. He only has 1. If he plays rook to f1, ugly move by the way, I'm able to play rook to b2 and guard my pawn. I could also take on a2, but usually you don't want to be trading the pawns in the endgame. You want to be winning them. Okay, bishop d3 cannot be good, bro. Because I'm definitely going to take that bishop. Look on this structure. That was the structure that you signed up for. Now I'm going to play rook to b2. Yo, this is actually tricky. It's actually tricky. Let me do this. Let me play b5 instead of rook to b2. So that way, if he plays rook to A7, I play rook d8 with the idea of rook d7, rook d2. If I had played rook b2, I'm thinking he would have played rook c1 and tried to get his second rook on my seventh rank, which is annoying. So now that he played rook to a7, maybe he should have played rook to d6. I'm going to play rook d8, then the pawn is going to be poisoned due to this. So let's go for this. Usually you don't want to be trading pawns in the endgame, but it's a good trade. Like, come on. It's a good trade. If he takes, then I play here. That's gonna die, and his king could also get mated. Two rooks on the seventh rank is just GG's. So he took the pawn. Let's play rook to d2, and then I'm gonna take here. The position is equal, but that's a dead pawn. Yeah, this is losing. This has to be losing for white. And maybe you want to play against me and you're not sure how. Leave your username in the comment and your ratings and just expect messages from me. You can also message me on Chesscom as well. Send me friend request and all of that stuff. Okay, pawn e6 was played. Definitely gonna take, but that's a check. So let's take with check first. He moves the king. Okay, first I'm gonna take on e6 just because I don't want him getting any pass pawn. But I'm also about to win another pawn. Like even if he takes this, I could take this. But his rook on a1 is not doing anything. I don't want to trade that rook. I'm gonna play rook h2, threatening mate and attacking this pawn. That's how I'm gonna win. So once I play rook h2, he has to play rook to g1. And then once he plays rook g1, I'm just gonna take on h4. So rook g1, we take on h4. Now we're ahead by 2 pawns. Rook f1, okay. Rook f1. Let's go back to h2. Wait, this is weird. Maybe check king over. If I go back to h2, he plays rook f3. Okay, let's go back to h2. I'm threatening a blind swine checkmate. Oh my god, that was bad. That was terrible. He literally just needs to take the pawn. Maybe not though. Maybe not actually. Because if he takes the pawn and I play, let's say I play rook to d7 now, right? First of all, I'm threatening 2 different mates. And what I wanted to tell you guys is if the rook goes back to f1, this is now just checkmate. Now, I know that this is mate because I know this pattern, like 2 rooks on the second, the rook is beside the king like this. This is usually mate in 3. Check, king over, swing the other rook over, and that's mate. So let's give a check on g2, forcing the king to move. Then we check on h2, forcing the king to move again. And that's just a checkmate. More CARO-KANN defense against 1900 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1900. Let's play some more CARO-KANN defense. So d4 we play d5, knight d2 we take, and because he's doing it so quickly, we're going to be seeing an alien gambit. I'm sure he's going to play knight g5. But that's a free point if he plays knight g5 because I'm ready. I know how to beat this gambit now. So let's see what he's gonna do. Like I have a feeling that some of these guys, you see, he's playing the alien gambit. I have a feeling that they play the alien gambit and some of them just like, you know what? I'm not gonna play the alien gambit against Hakim. But let's play h6. I mean, it's gonna be a very what's the word? Instructive game. Let's take the free knight. We're already ahead by a piece. He plays knight to f3. And again, the winning move in the alien gambit is pawn to c5. Now, he decides to play pawn to d5, which is a trick, by the way. If I take on d5 thinking I'm winning a pawn, he's actually gonna what is he going to do? He's going to play bishop to c4. And then once he plays bishop c4, I take the bishop and then knight e5 and he's winning my queen. So if somebody plays d5 against you, this is them trying to set up a trap. Do not fall for this. Another trap that you could fall for is if you play bishop g4. Because if you play bishop g4, knight to e5 check also wins material. With that being said, let's just play bishop to f5. Let's just develop like this. Like if he checks, I go to g8. And if he doesn't check, I play knight d7. So he played bishop to c4. What if I play knight d7 here? Preventing him from checking my king. And then if he plays d6 check, I play e6 block the check. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, there's also pawn to b5 that a pawn b5 is such a good move, yo. Whoa, look at this. Because his king is in the center of the board, I'm able to play pawn b5, sack the pawn. Because if he takes, the bishop is unprotected. I check, hit the king, pick up the bishop. Which means now if I play pawn to b5, it's just a free tempo on the bishop. That's crazy. So he's not gonna play bishop d3, obviously, because he doesn't want to trade. Maybe he's gonna check, and anytime they check, just play king g. Just remember that. Bro, you're 1900. You're representing Ethiopia. He resigns. What? More CARO-KANN defense against 2,000 rated players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 2,000. We're ending with a bang. CARO-KANN defense. Okay, knight e3. Let's take. And now we play knight f6. The Tartakov variation of the CARO-KANN. And then he decided to take with the knight. Very good. And from here, we know what the plan is. We're going to play bishop d6, castle the king. Bishop c4 is decent. Let's just go bishop d6. The main move is d3 followed by c3, by the way. Okay, queen to e2 check makes some sense, actually. Some sense. Because now I can't block with the bishop. I don't want to block with the queen, so I have to move this bishop again. But the thing is, this queen and this king is on the same line, and this pawn is unprotected. So, you know, so I'm assuming he's going to do something like this. Develop his bishop. Maybe he wants to get his king off the center of the board. Let me castle my king. And if this becomes an opposite side castle game, it's gonna be fun. And it is opposite side castles. Now, here's what I'm planning on doing because for one, I have to ensure that I attack fast, but I also need to ensure that I complete my development. Pawn to b5 is such a good move. I like pawn to b5 because I'm not sure if you guys understand that this bishop being on d5 in these types of position is nice. If you're able to play bishop e6, bishop d5, and then pawn b5, especially when there's no c4, you're chilling. So I would like for him to pull his bishop back to b3, thinking he's targeting h7. And then I'm going to go bishop e6 to target his pawn on a2. Now, there's also a lot of ideas of me playing queen a5. It's funny. This is actually funny. My attack is already there. You see, he plays king b1. I hit him with queen a5. Remember what we spoke about. When we're attacking the opponent's king, it's important that we attack the pawns around the opponent's king. I'm trying to force him to create weaknesses around his king. I want him to play a3 or b3. If he plays a3, I'm not going to sack my bishop. I'm going to play b4. If he plays a3, however, then I'm just going to develop, to be honest. I'm going to go knight d7 to b6 to c4. Personally, I would love to move my queen and then play a5, a4, but that's kind of weird. And I need to develop. Pawn b3, there's also knight a6 to b4. Wait, let's think about it. Let's say he plays b3, right? And I go knight d7 to b6 to d5. I'm trying to think, which route should I take? Should I go d7 to b6 to d5, which aims towards c4? Or do I go knight a6, which aims towards b4? Get him to push another pawn and then put my knight on d5. It's weird. So he plays b3. And because he plays b3, a knight is obviously not going to. I mean, a knight could go to c4, don't get me wrong. A knight could go to c4. But personally, let's play knight a6. Because knight b4 to d5 to c3 makes sense as well. I'm expecting bishop to d2 hit the queen. If bishop d2, can I play knight b4 still? Because if he gives up the dark squared bishop, it's over, it's GG's, it's checkmate. Because he already played b3, which means he's creating dark square weaknesses around his king. So if I'm able to get this bishop is what's helping him from not getting mated right now. But guess what? I had to move my dark squared bishop more than once in the opening stage of the game. How am I already fully developed? How's my rooks already connected? He's also not developing his knight. And he has to think about what to do because I'm going to play knight b4 next. Okay, maybe he's okay. There's no c3, there's no a3. Am I winning? Guys, white is positionally lost. The king is too weak. There's no way to prevent knight b4, queen a2, unless he plays bishop d2. If he plays bishop d2, knight b4, I'm still threatening to take. If he plays bishop takes, I play bishop takes, no, I'm threatening bishop c3, queen a3, and queen b2. Okay, pawn c4. There he goes, pushing pawns on the side that his king is on. Let's just take. This is a no-brainer. We're going to take because it opens the b file. Well, he's not going to take with the pawn. He has to take with the bishop. Now, if I takes, he plays queen takes. And then, okay, that wasn't too bad. I don't want to trade too many pieces. Let's play bishop to f5 check. I don't want to trade too many pieces. But bishop to f5, he's still able to block the check. That wasn't a bad defense that he found. I still think knight b4 to d5 to c3 is still good. Now my rook could get to b8. For example, if he blocks with the bishop, my rook could go to b8. I'm not sure if I should play knight b4 or rook b8. Though. That's the thing. They're both not doing anything. Knight on the edge of the board, rook not on an open file. Oh, I thought he would have. What is this? He plays king a8. If I check, he blocks with the queen. Okay, what if I play bishop b4 though? Bishop b4, he has to protect c3 square. Bishop b4, there's bishop b2, but then there's rook e8. Hit the queen. That's a tempo. Or knight b4 threatens bishop c2. It has to be knight b4 here. Yo, this is kind of. Wait, did he? I thought he missed a free. I thought he missed a free piece, but he was in check. So let's go knight b4. I'm threatening to play bishop c2, which would cut the communication off between the queen and the a2 pawn, and then the rook is not going to be able to move due to the mate. So he has to stop the mate and then lose the rook. We're only 15 moves into the CARO-KANN, by the way. The funny thing is, there's also no bishop to d2 because that's mate. Maybe he's gonna play a4, which is just ugly. A4 is just nobody wants to play A4. Don't be pushing pawns on the side that your king is on, but you have to play A4. Look on the difference between my king and his king. Okay. Oh well, rook to D2. He found rook to D2. Rook to D2 was found. If I check, he takes. If I takes, queen takes. Check doesn't do anything. If I takes, rook takes, check, he blocks. That doesn't do anything. Knight D5, he takes. And then I'm gonna take with the idea of bishop B4. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do knight d5. He's not defending too badly, but the good thing is I just have more pieces in the attack than him. So I just need to keep applying some pressure. And the whole time, he's going to be playing without his knight or his rook. Because after takes, the moment he develops his knight, I go bishop b4. And then bishop to c3 wins the game. So he took. We're just going to take back. It's normal stuff. We have the bishop here, unprotected bishop, but that's fine. He has no tricky discovers. Knight f3 was expecting that move. And as we said, once we play with check, he blocks with the rook, right? So we need to use the bishop. So that way, once we check and he blocks with the rook is pinned and we're winning. This is game. Because even if he blocks with the rook, well, I was going to say I'm going to play queen b3 to apply pressure to the pinned rook, but that really doesn't matter. Well, well, he doesn't. The guy doesn't want to block with his rook and lose his rook. So he prefers to block with his queen and lose his queen. Because my light squared bishop cuts off this diagonal. So once I check, the king can't move. The queen has to block. Do we take the queen? No, because it's pinned. Why rush? Let's just get the rook in the game. It's GG's. Now I'm threatening to king takes, queen check, and that could lead to a mate. He just sent me a message saying, I will never castle long against the CARO-KANN ever again. And he resigns. Please subscribe.